The MC of our story had awakened an S-class ability. He possessed the power to generate infinite mana. At first glance, it sounded like the kind of ability that would make him incredible, the kind that would have people praising him and women flocking to him. However, at the beginning of his story, reality looked very different. Instead of admiration, everyone looked down on him, because his magic was only useful to mages and healers. He was nothing more than a low-level hunter, who stuck at level 29. During battles, he could do nothing but stand on the sidelines and watch his role. Only mattered when the team's mages ran out of mana. At that point, he would step forward and recharge them. With his support, the mage would instantly return to full mana and unleash a full power attack, successfully defeating the boss. Even so, no one ever thanked him. To them, he was nothing more than a tool. After one such fight, the team leader coldly remarked that he hadn't contributed much that day and ordered him to help collect the useful parts. From a defeated boss, he felt deeply wronged, but he had no choice except to obey. Nearby teammates mocked him, questioning why someone who was supposedly part of the combat team had to handle logistics work as well. Others openly discussed his ability, pointing out that he only possessed infinite mana generation, even though it was an S-class skill. They claimed it was useless. Healers could already restore mana on their own, and his presence merely sped things up. Its value only appeared in extreme situations, like that day's boss fight, where massive amounts of magic were required. When hunting regular monsters, they said his ability was practically meaningless. Despite being a hunter for 5 years, he still hadn't even reached level 30. He could only endure their ridicule in silence, as they cracked jokes at his expense. Deep inside, he held on to the belief that everything would change the moment he reached level 30. Later at the Great Sage Guild headquarters, he heard the news he least wanted to hear. The guild informed him that no one was willing to team up with him anymore, since he was still only level 29. Clearing dungeons alone was impossible. After internal discussions, the guild decided to transfer him to the business department, claiming that he could make better use of his skills. There, hearing this, he questioned what all his effort had been for, if he couldn't even clear dungeons. In the end, he chose to leave. What no one knew, however, was that his ability was far more than simple. Infinite magic generation. His true skill had actually awakened, even before he became a hunter. The moment it activated, a pop-up suddenly appeared in front of him. When he selected the copy option, the pop-up instantly transformed into food in his hand. At first, he believed the skill to be incredibly powerful, but once he fully understood it, he realized just how terrible its drawbacks were. As soon as copied items left his body, they dissolved into streams of light and vanished. Even more infuriating was the fact that copied equipment had level restrictions. Any equipment that exceeded his own level would fail to copy entirely. Strangely enough, copied magic power did not disappear. It could even be transferred to others for their use. This led to widespread misunderstandings about his true ability, which was why everyone referred to it as infinite magic generation. Although he was also capable of copying other skills, those abilities came with various strict, conditional restrictions. Then a news alert popped up on his phone. It announced that the Kalesia Dragon Long Sword would be exhibited in an island nation. This long sword possessed 2 special skill slots, along with defense-boosting effects. Its most astonishing feature was that, the moment someone grabbed it, their level would instantly rise to 200, even though the equipment requirement was only level 30. However, this divine weapon, known as the Legendary Sword, had a massive drawback. It only had 10 durability points. For Sano Haruto, though durability did not matter at all, he copied it infinitely. All he needed was to reach level 30 within a week, and touch that sword with that goal in mind. He joined a temporarily formed team to conquer the Giant King's Spider Dungeon. Once again, he found himself hiding behind a mage, occasionally boosting the blonde man's mana. This blonde mage was extremely rude. Every time his mana was replenished, he would recklessly unleash ultimate attacks, without any concern about running out. However, Haruto no longer cared about his behavior. His attention was focused entirely on how much more experience he needed to level up. At that moment, someone called out to him, noting that he was still staring at his status. Information: this was Ikenaga, a member of the Great Sage Guild. He was indeed Haruto's junior, even though Haruto Sr. was living a rather miserable life. Haruto had heard that Ikenaga was short on money, which was why he joined temporary teams like this, to earn cash during his free time. Soon the team arrived at the boss room. The boss, waiting for them, was a level 80 giant king spider. The pressure in the room was overwhelming, and Haruto felt intense fear. He doubted whether they could really defeat such a monster, and found himself extremely nervous. Ikenaga noticed his fear, and I tried to comfort him, advising him to stay hidden in the back. He explained that defeating the giant king spider was actually simple, as long as they were careful of its silk. Once tangled, it would be extremely difficult to escape. He also warned that if the spider eggs were damaged, the giant king spider would go completely berserk before he could finish. The nearby blonde mage grew impatient. He questioned why. Ikenaga was explaining everything to someone who was essentially just an audience member, and urged everyone to start. Already irritated, he kicked a small stone at his feet. Unexpectedly, the stone struck some spider silk. The giant king spider instantly sensed the disturbance. It let out a deafening roar and launched an attack on everyone. Everyone cursed the mage bastard for causing trouble. Fortunately, the team's tank blocked the attack and even managed to sever one of the boss's legs. The team leader shouted for everyone to stop standing around and attack immediately. Everyone raised their weapons and charged forward, unleashing their signature skills. Meanwhile, Haruto could only hide behind them, silently cheering for his teammates. But despite that, an accident still occurred. Just as the giant king spider used its silk skill, the idiot blonde mage acted out once more. He cast a wide-range flame skill directly at the nest. The boss itself took no damage due to the silk's protection, but the spider eggs inside the nest were destroyed. Seeing this, the giant king spider completely lost control. It entered a berserk state and instantly spat out countless strands of silk. Everyone was caught. They failed to escape in time and were completely entangled. The blonde mage panicked, shouting in disbelief, as his flames failed to burn through the silk. His cries attracted the giant king spider's attention, and it slowly approached him. Only then did he realize the gravity of his mistake. Overwhelmed with terror, he screamed, and in the next moment, he vanished from the world entirely. Watching this scene, Haruto was filled with fear. His entire body was tightly bound by silk, leaving him completely unable to move. There was no one who could save him. The giant king spider shifted its focus to him, staring at the monster at such close range. He felt absolute despair. He had believed that this low-level dungeon would be safe, yet it had ended like this. He refused to accept such an ending. At that critical moment, his ability, automatically activated whenever he was about to die, would paste out a copy of himself from just before death. The original body would disappear. However, his resurrection did not free him from the crisis. He was killed by the boss again, and once more, his body was pasted back using the Control-V skill. The newly revived version of him immediately hid. This clearly was not working. As he struggled to think of a solution, he suddenly heard a weak cry for help. It was Ikenaga. He was still alive. Even so, Haruto could barely protect himself, while the boss continued to draw closer. He knew that if he did nothing, Ikenaga would surely die, cursing under his breath. He questioned how, as a senior, he could simply watch his junior be killed. With that resolve, he charged forward with his sword and struck the foot the boss was about to use for its attack. The powerful recoil sent him flying to the ground. Fortunately, the boss's attack was deflected because of that strike. At that moment, a system pop-up appeared before him. He had leveled up and reached level 30. He stared at the system panel in confusion, unable to understand what had just happened, or how he had suddenly leveled up. He wondered if his earlier attack had actually dealt damage. Before he could think further, he was killed by the boss once again, and Control-V activated yet again. Realizing the truth, he decided he would no longer run, since his attacks could harm the monster. He resolved to fight. Even if he had to die countless times, he would defeat it. After 3 days and 3 nights of non-stop battle, he had died 50 times. Nearly all of the team's weapons had been broken by him. His level had increased again, which is good news. The boss, meanwhile, was now covered in wounds. It was finally time to end this battle. He quickly dodged the boss's silk attack. When it attacked again, he seized the opening. He leaped onto the giant leg of the monster, raised his sword high, and lunged forward with everything he had, pouring all his strength into a slash, aimed at the boss's head at that critical moment. His sword shattered. It was the inevitable result of relying on cheap, copied goods, completely unreliable. The broken weapon caused him to lose balance, and he crashed heavily onto the ground. The boss let out a furious roar as he prepared himself to face death once again. A miracle occurred. The spot he had just struck suddenly began to crack. Those cracks rapidly spread across the boss's entire body. With a violent explosion, the giant king spider shattered into countless fragments. At that moment, Sano lay powerlessly on the ground. Breathing heavily, a sense of relief washed over him as he realized he had finally succeeded. Almost immediately, numerous level up notification windows appeared before his eyes. A system message followed, congratulating him on obtaining the giant king spider's rewards. After resting briefly, he carried Ikenaga and prepared to leave the dungeon. However, just as they moved forward, they were struck by a sudden attack. Looking ahead in terror, he saw countless level 30 spider offspring emerging. Panic surged through him while he himself might survive. Ikenaga was still injured. Facing so many spiders, the only thing he could do was use his own body to shield his junior. Just as the small spiders pounced, another miracle unfolded. The spider at the front was sliced cleanly in half, and a figure suddenly appeared before them. Countless spiders rushed toward this newcomer. At the mysterious girl merely raised her weapon. A terrifying hellfire erupted instantly, burning all the spiders into ashes. Hellfire was the highest level of fire magic, a power only a handful of people in the world could wield. If his memory served him right, there was only one person in this nation capable of using it, the magic swordsman who wielded the witch's blade. The nation's 5th-ranked hunter. He immediately realized who it must be. It was Hunter Nanesi. Nanesi surveyed the scene, looking at the bodies scattered across the ground, all of them belonging to high-level hunters. Shihi questioned whether the two of them were the only survivors. The situation was hard to believe. A low-level hunter like Sano had not only survived the boss room, but had also saved a teammate. This led Nene to wonder what had actually happened inside the dungeon, and how he had managed to accomplish all of this. The scene then shifted to the Hunter Association headquarters unexpectedly. Nanesi was also the director of dungeon immigration management. After a few simple inquiries, she identified the item in question as the giant king spider silk. He stated that, along with the other gains from the dungeon, it would be handed over later. If there was nothing else, they were free to leave. He found it hard to believe things could end so simply. Their team had been unregistered, which counted as a legal dungeon conquest. He questioned whether it was really acceptable for them to just leave. Nanasi explained that such incidents happened every day. Many unregistered teams entered dungeons without permission for their own interests, often resulting in casualties. The association had tacitly accepted this reality. Hearing this explanation, he finally felt relieved, let out a quiet breath, and stood up to leave. Nanesi picked up the spider silk and called after him, pointing out that he seemed to have forgotten it. He declined, asking her to pass it along with any other gains to his junior instead. After that, he closed the door and walked out, holding the spider silk in her hand. Nanasi was left puzzled, wondering what exactly the boy was hiding. Once outside, he could no longer contain himself. A triumphant smirk spread across his face. He had succeeded in copying the giant king spider's silk and now possessed an infinite supply. The item allowed the user to shoot silk, just like the giant king spider, featured strong adhesiveness, and had a usage level requirement of 40. Even so, he found the reward strange. After finally killing the boss, this was what he had obtained. Deciding to copy it first, he reached out and touched the spider silk. In the next instant, it vanished right before his eyes. He was completely confused, unable to understand what had just happened. A system notification appeared, stating that the giant king spider silk had been absorbed by his current skill, and his copy-paste skill upgraded. He stared at the system pop up in shock. His Control-C skill allowed him to copy controlled objects, while Control-V let him paste them. Now his skill had reached level 1 and unlocked 3 options. The revelation stunned him. He had never expected his skill to level up. Without hesitation, he clicked on the newly unlocked Control-C skill. Options. A new pop-up appeared. The first option allowed him to paste copied objects and maintain them for a desired duration. The second option allowed him to stitch any objects together within a specific time limit. The third option granted the ability to untangle the giant king. Spider's silk. This evolution was an enormous surprise. From now on, copied objects would no longer disappear immediately after leaving his body. To test it, he copied the spider silk and set the duration to 1 minute. As expected, it did not vanish after leaving his hand. Exactly 1 minute later, the spider silk disappeared on schedule. The implications were overwhelming. If he set the duration to 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years, the copied object would essentially never disappear. As he imagined the wealth he could extract from dungeon materials, he burst into laughter from that day onward. He was rich and the best life awaited him. Meanwhile, on the Rainbow Bridge, a massive truck sped forward. This vehicle was transporting the Khaleesi dragon sword. The transport personnel consisted of Morgrant, a level 112 fighter, and Ares Hugh, a level 131 mage. Both of them belonged to the International Hunter Association. This was supposed to be the final stop of the sword's exhibition. As they traveled, more casually asked Ares whether she planned to take a vacation. Once the mission ended, Ares responded that she intended to explore the island, nation's dungeons. Moore expressed hope that she would find treasure. This time, however, Ares was clearly not amused and retorted that meddling in other people's affairs would only invite trouble. At that moment, a report crackled through the radio, informing them that they were currently passing through the Rainbow Bridge. Dungeon communication, they were warned, would be interrupted for approximately 5 minutes due to electromagnetic interference inside the dungeon. Upon hearing this, Moore glanced out the window. The dungeon, resting on the surface of the sea, appeared strangely romantic to him. Ares, on the other hand, felt an unsettling sense of unease. At the same time, on the opposite side of the Rainbow Bridge dungeon, outside the immigration office, 2 hunters were standing guard. One of them yawned, complaining that the job was unbearably boring. His companion shot a dismissive glance at Shinatsu Satoru, mocking him for being a mere level 21 rookie who had obtained such an easy assignment through connections and still dared to complain. He reminded him that just 3 weeks ago, a major incident had occurred right at this location. Suddenly, something strange rolled to their feet. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a slime. She noticed Satoru quickly crouch down to pick it up, remarking that it looked even cuter than the ones found inside dungeons. However, his companion's expression drastically changed. The moment he saw it, he realized something was terribly wrong, questioning how a monster could possibly appear outside a dungeon. Before they could react further, a figure abruptly appeared nearby. One of them turned around in terror, only to see a massive, obese ogre swinging a club straight at them. Blood instantly splattered across the scene. Meanwhile, Haruto was still inside the Hunter Association. He was carefully studying his information panel, thanks to the enormous amount of experience he had gained from the dungeon conquest. His level had nearly reached 50. Once he hit level 50, he would be able to form teams and challenge ultimate dungeons. Just as he was feeling smug and preparing to use his ability to earn serious money, a group of hunters suddenly rushed past him. From their hurried conversation, he quickly learned that anomalies were occurring in the Rainbow Bridge dungeon and that it had been placed under red alert. Even more alarming was the fact that the truck transporting the Khaleesi dragon sword was currently on the bridge. The realization stunned him. The Khaleesi dragon sword was actually there, on the rooftop of the Hunter Association. Multiple aircraft were already on standby. Hunters from the association had gathered in full force, preparing to provide emergency support. At that moment, Nanisi stepped forward and announced that the mission's top priority was rescuing civilians, while protecting the Khaleesi, and Dragon Sword was only secondary. As Nanisi prepared to board her aircraft, she noticed a disturbance in the distance. Looking more closely, she realized it was Haruto, shamelessly attempting to follow along. He hurriedly explained that he wanted to come as well, claiming that he wished to save more people and could help guide and evacuate civilians. Nanisi was surprised to see him. She remembered how he had mysteriously survived before, while saving his junior, After a brief moment of consideration, she agreed to bring him along. From the other hunters, Haruto learned that the Rainbow Bridge dungeon was behaving abnormally. Unrest there had been suppressed just 3 weeks earlier, yet anomalies were appearing again. To him, nothing in this world felt surprising anymore. Even collapsed dungeons could collapse again, and each time it was their responsibility to stop it. They had to prevent the tragedy from 15 years ago from repeating itself back then. Global disasters had erupted simultaneously as national-level disaster. Dungeons collapsed across the world when monsters were not properly subjugated. Dungeons would collapse due to saturation. Countless monsters poured out into cities, attacking civilians and instantly turning entire urban areas into living hells. Haruto was one of the survivors of that catastrophe, but he had lost both of his parents. It was during that time that an otherworldly being had appeared before him. That being had placed the curse of copy-paste skills upon him. Although it called the curse a gift, it came with a 20-year limit. Haruto never knew whether that limit referred to the duration of the skill or to his own lifespan. Now only 5 years remained before the deadline. If that being's appearance had been connected to the global catastrophe, then its reappearance in 5 years would mean another disaster of the same scale. Now that Haruto had found a way to grow stronger, he made his resolve clear. If he could become the strongest hunter, he would prevent the next global disaster and finally lift the curse placed upon him. At this moment, the Rainbow Bridge was plunged into complete chaos. Explosions rang out from time to time as monsters rampaged through the area. Shinoda Satoru could only watch helplessly as countless monsters attacked fleeing citizens. There were simply too many enemies, far more than they could handle. It was clear that additional hunters were desperately needed. Suddenly, a goblin launched an attack from behind. Shinoda quickly turned and swung his sword, dealing with it, however. Just as he finished, another goblin attempted a sneak attack from the rear. Fortunately, someone intervened in time and saved him. It was the same companion from earlier. Shinoda expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that this was the second time he had been saved. That day he admitted that, if his senior had not stopped him earlier, he would already be dead despite this. Shinoda could sense that his senior still looked down on him, believing that he had only obtained his position through connections. Even so, Shinoda silently made a vow in his heart that, no matter what, he would repay this debt someday. His senior then urged him to move quickly toward the bridgehead and rendezvous with the rescue team. Meanwhile, at the center of the Rainbow Bridge, a massive beast was attacking the transport truck. It was a level 190 giant bear. Moore questioned whether the truck would truly hold up. Ares acknowledged his anxiety and reassured him that her protection magic was at the highest level, claiming that even a level 400 monster would be unable to break through her defense. However, an unexpected anomaly suddenly occurred. The entire bridge began to shake and sway violently. Everyone stared at the scene in disbelief, realizing that even the strongest defenses were useless in the face of this phenomenon. At that moment, the Hunter Association support aircraft finally arrived. But before any relief could settle in, a massive, dragon-like monster suddenly emerged from the sea. Ninasi immediately ordered all units to prepare for battle. In the next instant, the dungeon boss unleashed dragonfire directly onto the bridge. The devastating attack engulfed everything nearby. A huge section of the Rainbow Bridge vanished completely, leaving only the boss floating above the sea. From the aircraft, Sano Haruto watched the horrifying scene unfold, his heart filled with terror. The boss soon noticed the aircraft overhead and opened its massive jaws, clearly preparing another attack. Another overwhelming blast of dragon breath erupted. Moments later, the aircraft exploded. Everyone leaped out immediately to avoid the blast. With the sudden appearance of the dungeon boss, all plans were instantly revised. Every hunter from the association began preparing to subdue the boss, rapidly gathering their forces. Nanisi activated her magic, hellfire continuously pouring from her sword. With a powerful shout, countless hellfire blasts surged from the blade, rushing straight toward the monster. At the same time, Sano used his spider silk to land safely on the ground. His primary objective was now heading toward the Kalesia dragon sword. Along the way, he noticed numerous monster corpses scattered everywhere, Yet there was no sign of any hunters. As he pondered this strange situation, a desperate shout suddenly rang out, warning others to run ahead. Shinoda Satoru was desperately fighting off monsters. Behind him stood his severely injured senior. The wounded boy urged Shinoda to escape immediately, warning that he would die as well if he stayed. However, Shinoda refused to abandon his teammate. His senior angrily explained that low-level monsters appeared in high-level dungeons because they fought in groups, and their combined strength could rival that of high-level monsters. If Shinoda did not flee at once, it would soon be too late. Unfortunately, it already was. They were wolf demons, level 15 monsters that were weak individually, but terrifying in packs behind them. Countless more wolf demons were rapidly approaching. Even so, Shinoda Satoru felt no regret. His senior had protected him before, and now it was his turn to protect his senior. Sano observed the scene from a distance, reminded of the time he had once protected his own junior. In the next moment, the two were surrounded by wolf demons. Shinoda struggled desperately to resist, but there were simply too many enemies. Just as one wolf demon prepared to leap toward Shinoda, Sano suddenly appeared and slammed into the monster, knocking it away. Shinoda was shocked by Sano's sudden arrival, though his fear remained as more wolf demons closed in. Sano urged them to leave quickly, warning that even high-level hunters would struggle against such a pack. However, instead of retreating, Sano calmly remained where he stood, a faint smile appearing on his face. His words confused Shinoda. Just as the wolf demon pack lunged forward, Sano summoned his system panel, his expression remaining completely composed. In the blink of an eye, he was swallowed by the wolf demon pack. Shinoda was horrified by what he saw. But then, countless strands of spider silk suddenly burst forth, binding every wolf demon in place. Sano emerged from the pack unharmed. The effect was astonishing. The spider silk continuously tightened, restraining the demons more and more, until they were completely immobilized. The spectacle left Shinoda utterly stunned. He could hardly comprehend what kind of skill could wipe out so many monsters in a single move. However, Sano now faced a dilemma. If he left the two behind, they would likely be attacked again. Yet he had urgent matters to deal with, could not afford to bring them along. After brief consideration, he made his decision. Sano took out a bottle filled with red liquid and handed it to the injured senior. The boy stared at it in confusion. Sano explained that it was a mid-level potion, capable of healing his injuries. The injured hunter was shocked, unable to understand why something so valuable was being given to him. Sano explained that it was a senior's responsibility to safely bring their juniors back alive. Shinoda was deeply moved by those words and expressed his gratitude, vowing to repay this kindness someday. As Sano turned to leave, he suddenly stopped and looked back, wearing a slightly silly smile. He asked Shinoda to tell him which direction the International Hunter Association's transport vehicle had gone. Admitting that he had an extremely poor sense of direction, Shinoda stood there stunned, completely unprepared for the fact that his powerful savior was directionally challenged. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the Rainbow Bridge, a group of mysterious individuals were rushing toward the center. The sudden appearance of the dungeon boss had been completely unexpected. One wrong move here would cause them to lose everything. They knew that Hunter Nenesi and the association would prioritize subjugating the boss, since defeating it was the fastest way to stabilize the dungeon. Taking advantage of this situation, they planned to steal the Kalesia dragon sword. At the center of the Rainbow Bridge, the giant monster bear was still rampaging wildly. At that moment, Ares cast another sleep spell, instantly putting the giant bear back in his slumber. Maul questioned whether putting it to sleep again was really the right move, noting that despite being a hunter, Ares clearly had a pacifistic nature. Suddenly, a round iron ball flew straight toward them. Fortunately, Maul noticed it in time and sliced it cleanly in half with a single strike. He remarked that he had known they would come, recalling that similar incidents had happened several times during the Come Out Bandits touring exhibition soon after. A group of figures dressed entirely in black emerged from the shadows. One of them, possessing keen senses, stepped forward and expressed a desire to spar. With that, he leapt forward to attack. Maul immediately raised his sword to block and warned them not to underestimate guard work. He swung his sword in retaliation, but the opponent effortlessly dodged and retreated. Without hesitation, Maul pursued him. Ares urgently called out for him to stop, but it was already too late. Maul suddenly lost control of his body, and blood began to spray violently. He struggled to understand what was happening to him. Ares rushed over at once and explained that the enemy had used poison pills. Once poisoned, these pills blocked the body's ability to absorb magical power. Poison pills were clearly prohibited items under the rules of the International Hunter Association. Even a normally calm Ares was pushed into fury. She swore that she would make them regret this. Magic gathered in her hand, but the attack caused no damage at all. One of the black-clad individuals mocked her, claiming that a mage who could not use magic should simply die as he spoke. A massive fireball began forming in his hand. Before he could release it, his head was suddenly torn clean off. The attacker turned out to be the giant monster bear. It became clear that the earlier sleep spell had awakened the beast instead of keeping it subdued. Compared to the towering bear, the black-clad figures looked pitifully small. With a thunderous roar, the giant bear annihilated all the remaining black-clad attackers. Witnessing this, their leader immediately chose to flee, realizing the grave miscalculation. Retreating was the only option. After dealing with the black-clad group, the giant bear slowly turned and approached Ares and Maul. Ares acknowledged that she, too, was now affected by toxins that blocked magical power. Even so, she charged forward. A magic circle unfolded in her hand as she advanced. Seeing this, Maul shouted desperately for her to come back, warning that she would die. As she continued, Ares suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. She forcibly tried to channel magic to break through the toxins, enduring unbearable pain in the process. She questioned whether it was still not enough. By the time she reached the giant bear's feet, her magic was completely depleted. What awaited her were the monster's razor-sharp claws. Filled with regret, she apologized to Maul. Just as the giant bear's claws slashed downward, countless strands of spider silk suddenly appeared in front of Ares. The silks instantly bound the attacking claws and rapidly wrapped around the monster's entire body. The giant bear struggled violently, but it was futile. It was quickly tied up like an enormous dumpling, and soon stopped moving altogether. Ares stared at the scene in absolute disbelief. This was Sano's handiwork. His group of 3 had just arrived, and even they had not expected their plan to succeed so smoothly despite this. Ares and Maul immediately grew wary of Sano's group, suspecting that they might be more bandits, attempting to steal the sword. No matter how Sano tried to explain, they refused to believe him. It was only when Shinada Satoru presented his identification that their attitudes began to change. He explained that they were hunters from the National Hunter Association, responsible for managing entry and exit at the Rainbow Bridge dungeon. Seeing that their suspicion had eased, Sano offered further assistance, urging them to heal their injuries first. As he spoke, he took out 2 mid-level healing potions. Only then did Ares and Maul finally lower their guard. At that moment, several aircraft flew overhead. Shinoda exclaimed, in relief that new support teams had arrived. At last, meanwhile, Hunter Nines was still locked in battle with the dungeon boss. At that moment, the boss entered its 3rd phase. Nines immediately ceased her attacks and warned everyone to be wary of the wide range. Shockwave reinforcements had arrived, but their priority was buying time for citizen evacuation. Just then a familiar presence appeared. It was Shirasaki Masato, a level 503 dark mage. Nines turned around in surprise, shocked to see him there. Shirasaki had no intention of explaining himself. He simply raised his magic staff, and his magic activated. A massive magic circle appeared before the boss. Seeing this, Nines urgently told him to stop, warning that if such magic failed to defeat the boss, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, Shirasaki had no intention of backing down. He dismissed her concern, stating that nothing could ever be accomplished if one worried about such small matters, declaring that he would handle it this time. He activated his spell. Dark lightning descended instantly, engulfing the boss in terrifying black lightning. As it screamed in agony witnessing this, Anesi immediately ordered everyone to run. The boss's massive body collapsed, and the impact caused the rainbow bridge to sway violently from side to side after the chaos settled. The bridge was left utterly devastated. Sano felt overwhelming relief at having survived. Looking down at the shattered bridge below, he believed he had narrowly escaped death once again. Fortunately, everyone was still alive, and the transport vehicle remained intact. However, his relief vanished. When he looked toward the other side, a row of enormous, sharp teeth suddenly appeared. Sano was instantly frozen in fear, afraid that even the slightest movement would awaken the monster. At that moment, Shirasaki flew over. Sano noticed the emblem on his chest and realized it belonged to the Future Guild, ranked third in the island nation. Shirasaki's attention shifted to the giant bear that was bound nearby. He lightly touched the spider's silk restraining it, and instantly, the entire silk structure began to crack. Even the giant bear itself was torn apart into countless fragments. Sano was left utterly stunned by the sight. His attention was then drawn to the sound of a system notification. Massive level-up prompts appeared before him, yet there was no item reward for killing the giant bear. Shirasaki, standing nearby, also heard the notification and remarked that the spider silks had been created by Sano. He admitted that he had accidentally taken the giant bear's reward and returned it, stating that he disliked stealing from others. Just then an ace hunter arrived, clearly surprised to see Sano present. Nanisi immediately urged everyone to leave. She explained that if the monster woke up, it would instantly go berserk and unleash wide-range attacks. Sano questioned why they did not defeat it while it was still down. Nanisi explained that this was impossible. High-level bosses possessed multiple phases and had to be dealt with one phase at a time, according to the boss's abilities. With health dropped to 1/3, it would activate its ultimate skill, whether through berserk mode or area attacks. Everything would cover the entire battlefield. It had now only just entered the third phase. During this phase, the boss would generate a barrier to protect itself, while continuously absorbing surrounding magic power, rendering all attacks ineffective. At that moment, the boss's eyes suddenly opened. It roared furiously, awakening far earlier than expected. Shirasaki turned to look at Sano and bade him farewell, telling him not to blame anyone if he died. With that, Shirasaki rushed toward the boss alongside Nanes, and the two immediately re-engaged it in fierce combat. Sano immediately began organizing a rescue. He urgently informed everyone that the situation had escalated. The boss had entered its third phase and was about to unleash a wide-range attack. However, there was no longer enough time to escape the area. Everyone was stunned by this revelation. Sano then stated that he had only one option left. He needed to immediately obtain the Collesia Dragon Sword to defeat the boss. He promised that he would return it afterward. However, Maul refused to believe such words. Although Sano had saved him twice, despite being a low-level hunter, Maul insisted that even with the sword, Sano would not be capable of defeating an ultimate boss. Furthermore, the sword could not be used many times. In its current condition, Sano questioned whether it truly would not work. At that moment, Eri spoke up, explaining that a massive amount of magic power was required to unlock the transport vehicle seal. Unfortunately, due to the bandits' toxins, they were currently unable to absorb any magic power. Sano declared that this situation was perfect. He explained that he was known as the mobile magic charging station in the dungeon, due to his infinite magic generation ability. The moment his ability activated, Ares was instantly filled with magic power. The seal on the transport vehicle shattered. Immediately seeing this, Sano jumped inside at once. He assured them that he would keep his promise to protect everyone. Maul questioned why she would go that far. Ares replied that it was fine, noting that Sano had only restrained the giant bear earlier rather than killing it. Maul wondered whether that was what had moved her, concluding that women were truly incomprehensible creatures. After jumping into the transport vehicle, Sano was overwhelmed with excitement. The Collegia Dragon Sword was finally within reach. However, at that very moment, the bandit from earlier suddenly appeared behind him. With a blade raised by the time Sano sensed the danger, it was already too late. The bandit stabbed him directly through the chest. Sano collapsed inside the vehicle as the treasure sword finally came within the bandit's grasp. As the bandit slowly opened the treasure chest, a pitch-black long sword lay inside. A system message appeared, stating that upon the user's death, the giant foot spider silk would randomly dissolve. True to the warning, the spider silk shattered, and the entire transport vehicle plunged into the sea, sinking deeper and deeper into the dark depths. As the assassin reached out for the Khaleesi dragon sword, Sano revived and seized the moment. He stood up and stabbed the assassin straight through from behind. With a single strike, he believed himself to be the kind of person who repaid kindness with kindness, and revenge with revenge at last. Sono had obtained the Khaleesi dragon sword. He immediately activated his Control-C skill to copy it. However, a system warning appeared, stating that due to the user's level not meeting the target requirements, the object could not be copied. Sono stared at the system window in disbelief. Logically, the sword's level requirement was 30, and he was already above level 50. He should have met the conditions without question. Before he could process this, another accident occurred. The assassin from earlier was not actually dead. He viciously slashed Sono again, sending blood spraying everywhere. The assassin claimed that he had almost brought shame upon the Blood Tower Guild's assassins, adding that if not for his healing skills, he would have died long ago. The sword fell back into Sano's hands. The assassin declared that he was the type who forgot kindness and repays revenge tenfold, promising that this time, Sano would not get another chance. As he thrust his blade forward, Sano felt despair. He had come too far to fall here. Suddenly, the Khaleesi dragon sword fused with its user. It began copying the sword's value absorption ability. The word absorption appeared, leaving Sano confused about its meaning. However, the system notification continued. The sword's level was copied and absorbed. Its passive skill, a 35% defense increase, was copied and absorbed its unique skill. Vampirism was copied and absorbed. Its second unique skill, Berserk, was also copied and absorbed. All of the Khaleesi dragon sword's abilities were completely absorbed. A final notification appeared. When the user's health dropped below 25%, the Khaleesi dragon sword's protection mode would be triggered, forcibly executing its second unique skill, Berserk. At that moment, the Rainbow Bridge dungeon boss was on the verge of unleashing its ultimate skill. A wide area attack began forming, and the situation looked extremely dire. Just then, an enormous burst of energy erupted from the seabed, piercing straight through the boss's entire body. Shirasaki and Nines stared at the scene, in complete disbelief. A system message immediately flashed, announcing that the boss had been successfully defeated, and the dungeon had been cleared. Later, at the Japan Hunter Association official meeting was being held, it stated that at 4 o'clock that afternoon, the Rainbow Bridge dungeon outbreak had caused major casualties and widespread destruction. Thanks to the hunter's assistance, the dungeon had been quickly pacified. Before the report could continue, the association's president abruptly cut off the video feed and told everyone to stop making those expressions. Takeuchigo questioned whether the boss had not been successfully killed. This time, Shinoda Makoto then interjected, pointing out that he had heard the Rainbow Bridge dungeon had already been pacified. Just 3 months ago, even if it had been pacified, he argued it was still possible for it to erupt again. Another voice harshly interrupted, demanding to know how things were being managed when dungeons kept erupting repeatedly in such a short period of time. Nanasi, seated to the side, showed no interest in the argument. However, trouble soon found its way to her. Takeuchi's voice pressed the issue, questioning how an ultimate boss, which normally required more than 5 months to recover, could appear again so soon. 3 months ago, there had been no successful strategy to defeat it at all. Nines, who had wanted no part in their quarrel, finally lost her patience as the accusations turned toward her. With a loud slap, she smashed the conference table apart with a single palm. Just as the conflict was about to escalate, the Hunter Association president quickly stepped in to mediate. He admitted that his staff had been rude and apologized on their behalf. Still, the others refused to back down. At that point, Nines finally spoke. She stated that hearing alone was never enough, and that seeing was believing. No matter what explanation she gave, they would not trust her words. She explained that the shockwave witnessed earlier was actually the reward from defeating the Rainbow Bridge boss 3 months ago. If they doubted her, they could ask the person seated beside her. She added that she would personally take responsibility for investigating the cause of this outbreak and would hold the negligent guild accountable this time. Just then Maul and Ares entered the room. They announced that they were representatives of the International Hunter Association and had an important declaration to make. The Alicia Dragon sword had been stolen, and they requested that priority be given to assisting them in recovering it. Takayashi questioned this, stating that he had heard the transport vehicle's seal had been unlocked. During the attack, Maul replied that this was because they had accepted the association's request for hunter assistance. He also mentioned that Shinoda Satoru, from a major guild, Sano from the Hunter Association, had both been present at the scene. This revelation shocked everyone. President Fua immediately took out his phone and searched for information on Sano, only to find nothing. Only Nanisi knew Sano's true identity. She wondered whether Sano had really stolen the sword. The answer was obvious to her. Of course he had not. The Kalisha Dragon sword had already been taken by the assassin, who had handed it over to the true mastermind. Kurosaki Takumi, simply holding the sword, boosted a person's level by 200. The long sword identified its user through runes carved into its handle. To Kurosaki, spending hundreds of millions to cause a dungeon outbreak was still worth the price. As the assassin reached out to collect his payment, Kurosaki killed him without hesitation. The fewer people who knew the secret, the better at that moment. The Kalisha Dragon sword's durability dropped by 2 points, leaving only 8 remaining. Kurosaki looked down at the sword in his hand and smiled. It would be far too boring. He thought if the sword were to break before he had the chance to repair it. And suddenly Sano jolted awake from his nightmare. The mark on his neck emitted a faint blue glow. He realized that the hourglass countdown was acting up. Again, seeing him wake, Shinoda Satoru was overwhelmed with relief. He explained that he had been terrified. Sano would never wake up. Shinoda Satoru mobilized many hunters from the Great Sage Guild to search for Sano, and they had eventually found him, unconscious on a beach. His friend then added something Sano did not know yet. Shinoda Satoru was actually the son of the Great Sage Guild's president, Shinoda Shiro. Hearing this, Sano was utterly stunned and could hardly believe it. Meanwhile, inside the Hunter Association president's office, Nines was questioning Maul. She asked whether he had personally witnessed Hunter Sano's death. Maul confirmed that they had seen it with their own eyes and asked whether Nines was not surprised to see him alive again. Nessie responded calmly, stating that she had witnessed many strange things since becoming a hunter. Ares then requested that several high-level hunters be assigned to assist them in tracking down the sword. President Fua agreed and instructed Nenesi to coordinate the operation with them. He explained that not just anyone could use the Kalisha Dragon sword. Runes carved into its handle determined the user's level. Ares stated that she could sense and track those runes and had felt them being activated about an hour earlier before it was stolen. The sword's durability had been 10, but now it had decreased. They needed to find it before it disappeared completely. Meanwhile, at Central Hospital, Sano sat alone on the rooftop, examining his information panel. It showed that he was level 76, with an additional 200 bonus levels. Skill proficiency level 2, and profession proficiency level 9. He reflected that, although he had been unable to copy the Kalisha Dragon sword itself, all of its abilities had been absorbed into him. Among them, the Berserk skill stood out as especially terrifying. He reviewed the Berserk skill's details. All ability values and levels were doubled for 1 minute with a cooldown of 1 day. The activation condition was forced when users' health dropped below 25%. He remembered that it had once directly killed a boss above level 400. That boss had been successfully defeated, granting him the dungeon clearing reward. He had also obtained the boss skill Shockwave, and his Control-C skill had evolved. The Shockwave skill had been absorbed and transformed into 2 new abilities, Inherent Vibration and Inherent Wave. His Giant Spider Thread skill had also upgraded to level 2, Now, when using giant spider thread, he could simultaneously activate Inherent Wave. In vampirism, he realized that his copy-paste ability had evolved into an absorb and fuse skill. The realization amazed him. Inside the elevator, Sano laughed quietly to himself. A little girl nearby looked at him and wondered aloud if something was wrong with him. Meanwhile, Sano was thinking about how he had just tested inherent vibration and how incredibly powerful it was. As the thought crossed his mind, a sinister smile appeared on his face, causing the other passengers in the elevator to tremble. With fear, the little girl whispered, but the uncle looked scary. Just as Sano stepped out of the elevator, a familiar voice stopped him. Someone expressed relief that he was safe, followed by a reminder that he had been told to run. Immediately, whenever danger appeared, Sano quietly approached, wondering who Hunter Nanisi was. Visiting at the hospital then, he heard an apologetic voice, saying that they were sorry for causing worry. At that moment, Sano realized the truth. Nanisi and Shinoda Satoru were siblings. His jaw dropped in shock. After the siblings talked for a short while, Hunter Nanisi began asking about Sano's whereabouts. Hearing this from a distance, Sano immediately hit himself. A wave of unease surged through him as he wondered whether they had discovered that he had impersonated the Hunter Association. To steal the sword, he realized he needed to slip away before anyone noticed. However, before he could escape, Maul caught him red-handed. Maul angrily accused him of running away like a thief. Sano instantly understood that there was no way out. Anymore, Maul grabbed him by the collar and slammed him hard against the wall. He accused Sano of daring to lie about being from the Hunter Association. No matter how Sano tried to explain himself, Maul refused to believe him. They had clearly seen Sano die before, yet now he was alive and moving around normally. To Maul, that alone proved Sano had to be working with the bandits. Fueled by rage, Maul drew his long sword and prepared to unleash a special technique. Ares hurried forward, trying to stop him. However, Maul had already lost control of his emotions and raised his sword intent on stabbing Sano. Just as the blade was about to strike, Sano's inherent vibration skill activated on its own. Light burst out from his fingertips. The instant the light made contact with the blade, Maul's long sword shattered like fragile glass. The weapon disintegrated completely. Maul stood frozen in disbelief, staring at the remains of his sword. At that moment, the siblings were drawn by the disturbance and witnessed the entire scene. Nanesi immediately recognized what had just happened. That had been the Rainbow Bridge boss's shockwave skill. A realization struck her. Could Sono be the one who had killed the boss? The scene then shifted. What appeared next looked like a massive K-pop stage. The girl was dancing under bright lights, her body slick with sweat, as the crowd roared wildly, cheering obsessively in the following moment. The scene cut to her hopping into a car. Her name was Erida Sarah, and her profession was that of an idol group member. She waved goodbye to her fellow idols, climbed into her Ferrari, and drove off. As she left, the girls behind her began gossiping. They wondered whether she came from a wealthy family and questioned where she could possibly be heading. In a Ferrari, Erida stepped on the accelerator bed through the road, took a sharp turn, and nearly crashed into a Jeep. She slammed the brakes, narrowly avoiding the collision, then leaned out of the window and angrily shouted for the other driver to watch where he was going. The Jeep's driver stepped out, and the moment she saw him clearly, Erida instantly fell silent. It was Kurosaki Takomi. She clearly knew who he was. Without any hesitation, he casually dropped a sword onto the hood of her Ferrari, as if it were nothing more than junk mail. He commented on her concert, hoping it had gone well, because now they were heading to a dungeon. He added that if she was willing, things could go back to the way they used to be. Whatever history existed between them was unclear, but it was obvious that Erida was not happy to see him. The scene then cuts to the ruined building, where Kalesia Dragon Sword was used last time. Unfortunately, the place was completely empty. They had arrived too late. Nanisi questioned whether this meant they would have to wait until the sword was used again in order to track it. Ares' silence gave him the answer immediately. That was exactly the case. Just then Sano spoke up. He mentioned the Blood Tower, recalling that it was something the man who stabbed him had muttered while he was unconscious. However, no one present seemed to know what that was. It sounded like some kind of secretive, underground organization. Maul began to grow anxious, stating that if they continued wasting time like this, the sword would not last much longer. Nanisi calmly told him not to worry. She knew someone who had information on all of these shady organizations 15 years ago. If disaster struck the entire world simultaneously, massive numbers of monsters burst out of dungeons and flooded into cities. Countless civilians were attacked, and entire cities instantly turned into living hells. Amid the ruins, Erita Sarah encountered an interdimensional being that granted her a special ability. At first, she believed her awakening as a hunter had simply given her a rather unique skill. Her ability was called Control-Z, functioning exactly like a computer operation that allowed undoing actions. It enabled her to restore any object to its original state, whether healing wounds or repairing broken items. Erida used this power to restore scrap items and earned money from it occasionally. She even acted as a healer, helping injured people recover. However, she was dissatisfied with how slowly she earned money. She desperately needed large amounts of it. During the Great Disaster, her parents had fallen into a coma. She tried using her skill to restore them, but it required an enormous amount of magic power. Without sufficient magic, he could only heal minor injuries. Only hunters could absorb magic power on their own to obtain what she needed. Erida joined a hunter team, handling logistics, and occasionally acting as their healer. As someone who had not fully awakened, every expedition felt like facing lions with bare hands, constantly surrounded by danger. She was only there to obtain a share of magic power. Even so, her teammates often mocked her. During one dungeon raid, the team suffered devastating losses. Only Erida survived badly injured, standing among her dying teammates. She chose not to heal them. Instead, she collected the equipment they had dropped. She declared that she was sick of living like this. At that moment, a man suddenly appeared before her. He told her that he had heard she needed magic power and proposed a contract. He introduced himself as Kurosaki, just like that Erida was taken away by him, and eventually became a member of an idol group. Kurosaki later remarked how enviable her life looked, being able to eat delicious food 3 times a day while maintaining her figure. Kurosaki recalled the first time he had seen her. Back then, someone had been about to die right in front of her, yet she had only cared about looting equipment. That was when he realized they were the same kind of person. To avoid misunderstandings, Kurosaki clarified that as long as the contract existed, he would not interfere with whatever she chose to do. Rita then asked why he wanted her to enter a dungeon with him. This time, Kurosaki took out the Kalesia dragon sword and explained that he needed her ability to repair it. Restoring it required an enormous amount of magic power. He promised that this would be the last time. He asked her to enter a dungeon. Hearing this, Rita became extremely excited. She asked whether the infinite item generation was located inside that dungeon. Kurosaki confirmed that they had found it, although their contract was meant to keep her away from dungeons. As much as possible this time, she had to accompany him, and he promised it would be the last. Not long after Sano and his group arrived at the future guild headquarters, the person Ines had mentioned turned out to be Shirasaki. Even though the Future Guild was the country's second largest guild and had a questionable reputation, its dungeon strategies management and intelligence gathering were still considered world-class. Shirasaki entered the office to meet them and explained that, according to the Future Guild's investigation, the Blood Tower was an extremely mysterious organization. Recently, they had set their sights on the Golem Snow Mountain Dungeon. This dungeon had been discovered 15 years ago and had never been successfully cleared. Records showed it was the most troublesome dungeon known, with only 2 strategy groups and 1 collection group ever having attempted it. There was also a hidden boss, the Giant Golem. Defeating it reportedly granted a hidden reward, known as the Giant's Heart, also referred to as Infinite Generation. Hearing this, Sono reflected on the concept of infinite generation. While he did not need it himself, it was undeniably powerful. What puzzled him was its connection to the Kalesia dragon sword. He wondered whether they planned to use the sword to defeat the dungeon boss. Shirasaki revealed that the Blood Tower Guild was secretly recruiting through the dark web to clear the dungeon. Their notice stated that they were recruiting a golem Snow Mountain Strategy Group, consisting of 30 members, all level 90 or above. The recruiter was the Blood Tower Guild. Their behavior was described as extremely vile, frequently assassinating dungeon teams in secret and plundering items. It was a guild steeped in darkness. At that point, Nanace stepped forward and asked whether Shirasaki planned to personally form a team to clear Golem Snow Mountain, since he already had the Giant's Heart project. He insisted that they had to move immediately and asked whether he had a strategy group that could be mobilized right away. Shirasaki cursed under his breath, wondering how he had been dragged into this by that woman despite his reluctance. He led his strategy group to the Snow Mountain, which naturally included Sono and the others. Inside Golem Snow Mountain, they encountered ice golem giants. These monsters were level 40 with low attack power, but their numbers were enormous. Although not high level individually, they could respond endlessly, as long as their cores remained intact, making them extremely troublesome. Shirasaki muttered that he really had not wanted to come to such a hellish place. He raised his magic staff, and immediately, large numbers of golems were lifted into the air. As his dark magic activated, the airborne golems rapidly converged toward a single point with a single command. They exploded in the next instant. A massive blast echoed through the area, and the golems were reduced to rubble. After clearing the area, Shirasaki reminded his teammates to destroy the fallen cores. The future guild hunters instantly relaxed, confident with their captain leading them. One team member remarked how easy it was. From that point on, Shirasaki continuously wiped out monsters. Using his dark magic, Sano watched everything from a distance, completely speechless. The same man who had been so resistant earlier had now become the most enthusiastic person there. According to Ares' investigation, the dungeon was an inductive type. Dungeons were generally divided by areas. In ordinary dungeons, familiar routes allowed hunters to bypass certain areas and directly challenge the final boss. However, inductive dungeons required every area to be cleared in sequence. If they failed midway, hidden areas would never appear. That meant they had to defeat a certain number of golems before the boss would even emerge. The boss would only appear in the hidden area afterward, and speed was crucial. If the reward for defeating the boss was the key to entering that hidden area, they needed to secure it before the Blood Tower Guild did. Sano, however, did not care about the hidden boss at all. He had only one purpose for coming here. He wanted to help Ares retrieve the Collesia Dragon Sword. Sano activated Control V, unleashing giant foot spider silk instantly. Countless strands of spider silk wrapped around the golems. As the silk tightened, inherent wave activated, simultaneously crushing the golems into pieces. He even struck a cool pose, firmly believing that real men never looked back at explosions. At the same time, Ares used ice magic to freeze the golems ahead. Combined with Maul's slashing attacks, the monsters were easily defeated. Even so, the golems remained troublesome, and several hunters failed to keep up, suffering heavy injuries. Fortunately, Nanisi arrived in time. She severed Golem's arm with a single strike, then raised her palm and charged up a shockwave. The blast instantly reduced the monster to powder. She then turned to check on the injured hunters. That was when she noticed a familiar face among them. It was her younger brother, Shinoda Satoru. She demanded to know what he was doing there. Shinoda immediately retorted, questioning why he could not be there, and declaring that he was an official member. Supporting Sano, Nanace shot back, calling it nonsense. It turned out that when Sano had proposed planning the dungeon run, Noda Satoru had thrown a tantrum just to come along. He had insisted repeatedly that he wanted to go as well, worried that Sano might get lost again, and claiming he could help guide him. Sano had been helpless against this persistence, and eventually agreed, but only on one condition. Shinoda could only join as a member of his team. Hearing this, Nanace felt a headache forming. She wondered what two low-level hunters thought they were doing forming such a rookie team. However, Inoda immediately defended Sano, insisting that he should not be underestimated. He claimed that he had personally witnessed Sano cut the Rainbow Bridge dungeon boss in half, recalling the strange events of the past few days. Anesi admitted that such a feat might indeed be possible still. One question remained firmly in her mind. How had Sano actually managed to do it? Meanwhile, on the other side of the dungeon, the Blood Tower Guild was also rapidly clearing out golems. Kurosaki and Erida were resting leisurely near the entrance of a cave. Kurosaki commented that there was no need for them to participate in clearing mobs like this, since they could simply use stealth skills to hide. Among the strategy group, Erida replied that although stealth skills were convenient, they still needed to be careful around high-level hunters, whose perception was often extremely sharp. Kurosaki then asked about the progress of magic absorption, pointing out that the device they were using was a high-grade magic transmitter. Erida explained that it had been very expensive. She added that defeating 100 low-level monsters was required to fully charge it. She continued by explaining that during the previous Rainbow Bridge dungeon, she had used 10 of these transmitters to trigger the outbreak. Restoring the Kalesia Dragon Sword would require roughly twice that amount. Erida then asked whether Kurosaki intended to restore the sword so it could be used to defeat the hidden boss. In this dungeon, she noted that from what she understood, the hidden dungeon possessed an extremely powerful barrier, and the only way to break it was with the Kalesia Dragon Sword. Curious, she pressed him about where he had obtained such information. Kurosaki showed no intention of answering. He firmly told her that she only needed to restore what he wanted and did not need to concern herself with the details. Erida thought to herself that his eyes were frightening. Silently, she resolved that, as long as their contract remained in effect, she did not care what Kurosaki did, as long as she could obtain enough magic power to restore her parents. She was willing to do anything. Meanwhile, Sano's group had already defeated around 200 golems. A mutation suddenly occurred. The ground began to crack, and countless fragments of golem shot forward. From the darkness, a terrifying presence stared at them. In the next moment, a massive monster appeared before everyone. It was the Golem Snow Mountain boss, known as Curveball, a level 150 monster. The boss extended its enormous hand toward them. Someone cursed under their breath, remarking that the boss was far too large. Just then, Shirasaki stepped forward and struck the boss with dark magic, instantly shattering it into pieces. His team exclaimed in amazement, shocked that he had finished it with a single blow. However, the surrounding debris immediately began to gather toward the center. Once again, 2 nearby hunters froze in fear. In no time at all, the boss had nearly recovered. Realizing the danger, Shirasaki hurriedly unleashed dark magic again, shattering the boss a second time. Even so, the core remained intact. At that critical moment, Sano seized the opportunity and directly used giant foot spider silk on the core. Countless strands of spider silk wrapped around it. Unfortunately, the silk's speed and strength were not enough to stop the boss from regenerating. The boss appeared even stronger than before. Sano cursed in frustration. Each time the boss recovered, it absorbed the surrounding golem debris. They needed to think of a solution quickly. At that moment, Nanisi charged straight at the boss, swinging her spear engulfed in hellfire. However, the attack had no effect whatsoever. It was impossible to melt the core. Nanisi realized the truth. This boss was deceptive. Although it appeared arrogant and overwhelming, it was actually the most troublesome part of the entire dungeon raid. Its appearance was triggered after a certain number of golems were defeated. The true danger lay in its ability to repair itself. Using golem debris, this self-repair mechanism was the most terrifying aspect of inductive dungeons. Most ordinary hunter teams would have already fled in panic or been completely wiped out. This monster alone could rival the ultimate boss of many standard dungeons. There were only 2 ways to defeat it. One was to destroy its core, and the other was to melt all the golem debris it used to repair itself. Both options required an enormous amount of effort. After only a few exchanges, Naness was already drenched in sweat. Then the boss revived right behind her. Relying purely on willpower, Naness spun around and unleashed hellfire once more, completely melting the surrounding debris. Sano watched anxiously from the sidelines. He knew that the Kalesia Dragon Sword could easily solve this problem, but using it would expose his secret to Ares. And the other suddenly, an idea struck him. He retrieved an item he had obtained earlier from his system space, was called the Giant Bear's Foot. The item possessed 2 main skills. One allowed the user to control any object for a certain duration, and the other allowed the user to enter an object and deal damage from within. Without hesitation, Sano activated Control C and absorbed it. New abilities flowed into him. The first skill greatly increased the solidity of his spider silk when used together. The second skill allowed him to enter a target's body and absorb 15% of their health. In magic power with no time to hesitate, Sano charged straight toward the boss. This time there was a real chance. Meanwhile, Nanesi was still desperately melting golem debris. Even a powerful hunter like her could not use Hellfire indefinitely. If this continued, she would soon be in serious danger. Just as Nanesi reached her limit, the boss golem extended its massive hand straight toward her at that critical moment. Countless strands of spider silk suddenly shot out and bound the boss tightly. Wrapping it like a mummy, it happened just in time. Everyone stared at the scene in disbelief. Sano urgently called out to Shirasaki, asking him to launch another attack. He needed Shirasaki to strike. While he focused on stopping the core's movement, Shirasaki did not hesitate. He immediately activated his dark magic, and the boss was shattered into pieces once more. The moment the core appeared, countless strands of spider silk instantly wrapped around it, sealing it tightly. This completely blocked any contact between the core and the surrounding debris. It was a success. Shirasaki could hardly believe his eyes. They had actually managed to trap a high-level boss using such low-level items. Everyone cheered at the incredible sight. Not far from the battlefield, Kurosaki and Erida had been watching everything, planning to swoop in and reap the benefits. However, Sano's sudden use of spider silk had completely disrupted their strategy. Kurosaki ordered Erida to stop collecting magic power, advance the plan, and prepare for combat operations. Immediately, all the Blood Tower Guild hunters began to move. Because of that strange guy, everything had taken an unexpected turn. Now seizing the core would be extremely troublesome. Kurosaki realized that he would have to act personally. Then came the question of who should destroy the core. Everyone unanimously agreed that, since Sano had captured it, he should destroy it. Sano did not refuse. After all, he truly needed that reward. With one swift thrust of his sword, the core shattered instantly. The shift golem was finally defeated. At once, countless level up notification sounds rang out for everyone. A system notification confirmed that the shift golem's core had been destroyed. The reward was the key to close the heart. This key could open the dark door that sealed the giant's heart. At the same time, the key to a hidden area was instantly obtained. Sano's level skyrocketed from 85 to 285. His skill proficiency reached level 5, and his profession proficiency hit level 10. He was overwhelmed with the sword's effect. He was now level 285, just 15 levels away from becoming an advanced hunter. At level 300, Sano laughed triumphantly. Meanwhile, Shirasaki, watching from behind, was completely baffled. He wondered why someone, who was supposedly just a level 85 rookie, could be so happy. Nanesi mocked Shirasaki, pointing out that he had just assisted a rookie in capturing the boss. Just then, massive black pillars suddenly erupted from the ground. Everyone stared in confusion. More identical, black pillars continued to appear all around them. Each pillar was covered with mysterious runes. Shirasaki shouted for everyone to get away from the area quickly, but it was already too late. The space surrounded by the stone pillars exploded violently. All nearby hunters were caught in the blast. After the explosion, the future guild hunters were left lying on the ground, severely injured. A figure emerged from the smoke and dust. The man spoke calmly, stating that in this world, there was truly nothing money could not accomplish, and that as long as one abandoned their conscience, victory became extremely simple. He then added that he had finally found them. Sano issued a command to dispel the giant king spider's web. The web began to dissipate from within. Sano was immediately flung out. He spotted Kurosaki holding the Kalesia dragon sword. Sano raised his sword at once and charged forward, demanding that the sword be handed over. However, his attack was like an egg hitting a rock. The masked man casually remarked that Sano was quite clever. He continued, stating that not only had Sano used the web to defeat the boss, but he had also successfully withstood the impact of the explosion. He admitted that Sano had completely disrupted his plan. With that, Kurosaki swung his sword down at Sano. The blade slammed into the ground with a vicious slash. Nane screamed anxiously, completely losing her temper. She raised her spear and unleashed her strongest skill. Hells fused at that moment. Ares noticed Nanisi's erratic behavior and frantically tried to stop her, but it was already too late. A terrifying blast of hellfire shot straight toward Kurosaki. When the smoke cleared, everyone was shocked to see that Nanisi was the one who had been severely injured instead. Seeing this, Shirasaki shouted anxiously for recovery skills to be used. Ares immediately intervened, warning him that magic could not be used. During the explosion, the air had been filled with toxic gas, which prevented proper absorption of magic power. This was the Blood Tower Guild's usual trick. Just then, black liquid began emerging from the ground. Kurosaki reappeared in front of everyone. Completely unharmed, Shirasaki exclaimed, in disbelief that this was impossible. He immediately realized that it was shadow movement that man could actually use, the highest level skill in the stealth system. Kurosaki approached the dying Sono once more. He noticed that the boss key had fallen nearby. As he picked it up, the key transferred him. Kurosaki thought to himself that the objective had been achieved. However, he had no intention of leaving. He directly grabbed Sano by the neck and slammed him heavily against a nearby stone pillar. He declared that Sano had to die there. Sano grinned. He thought the same thing. He had never expected the one who stole the sword to be such scum. He quietly activated his web skill, wrapping Kurosaki completely. Then, using giant spider thread, he triggered the giant bear chain skill. Moments later, the webs grew sharp spikes, coiling tightly until they formed a massive, garlic-shaped bulb. This was the consequence of stealing his sword. But when the web dissolved, Sano was shocked there was nothing inside. Just then, Kurosaki emerged from behind him. He admitted that he had been careless, and that it was the first time he had ever seen such a skill. If his shadows had not been inside as well, he would have died with that. He prepared to deliver a fatal blow to Sano, stating that Sano would not survive without mana. Sano remained calm. He asked whether Kurosaki knew his nickname. Everyone used to call him the moving mana charging station, even though it was the first time he was using his ability like this. There should not be any problems. Suddenly, Shirasaki felt an endless surge of mana gathering inside his body. He had no idea what was happening, but it felt perfectly right. He resolved to end the Blood Tower Guild right there. In an instant, a massive orb of light condensed in the air. Kurosaki watched in confusion. He recognized it as Shirasaki's wide area magic. He could not understand where Shirasaki had obtained enough magic power to unleash such a large-scale spell. At the same time, he realized his shadow movement was being countered, and that he could no longer escape. The situation had become extremely troublesome. Left with no other choice, Kurosaki decided to proceed with his backup plan and called out to Erida. She immediately acknowledged him. At once, all the boxes surrounding Erida opened. Countless streams of magic power flew out from them, condensing into a massive orb in the air. A command echoed, ordering the restoration of Golem Snow Mountain Dungeon to its initial stage. Suddenly, the entire Snow Mountain let out a violent howl as fierce winds erupted. Terrifying air currents instantly swept across the area. Fortunately, Shirasaki reacted quickly and activated a barrier, protecting everyone inside it. Amid the raging air currents, golem debris began to gather together, slowly reassembling itself. They had revived once again. Confusion spread among everyone. Dense swarms of golems poured out anew. A massive golem clenched its fist and launched an attack, instantly appearing right in front of Shirasaki. Shirasaki cursed under his breath. There was still poison gas lingering in the air, interfering with the absorption of magic power. He realized he had to use a barrier to protect everyone. As Shirasaki struggled with this dilemma, Nanesi suddenly stepped forward and struck the golem directly with fierce hellfire. Kurosaki was shocked by this sight. He questioned how Hunter Nanesi could still use magic power. Nanes responded by pointing out what Sano had said earlier. The moving magic charging station could infinitely generate magic power and share it with companions. This was said to be Sano's unique skill. Shirasaki was stunned. He believed this was impossible. Only mage-type hunters were capable of doing such things, and Sano was not one at all. Super high-level hunters like himself and Nanes required massive amounts of magic power to activate their skills, yet it was not just him. Every member present had just had their magic power instantly refilled. By Sano, he admitted that he had never heard of any skill that could infinitely generate magic power. If it was truly real, then instead of searching for the giant's heart, they should simply invite Sano to join their guild. Shirasaki then realized something else. He had not expected that the Blood Tower Guild could reinitialize a dungeon. That explained why the Rainbow Bridge dungeon had been continuously rioting within such a short time. The real question now was how many times they could use this ability. He doubted they could use it again anytime soon. So far, they had not discovered the hidden dungeon. There had to be some hidden condition they did not yet know about. The Blood Tower Guild must have done something to make the hidden dungeon appear with 100% probability. But it was still strange. There were definitely fewer golems here now compared to the original Snow Mountain. In any case, they needed to deal with these golems as quickly as possible. After that, they could catch up to the Blood Tower Guild. As his thoughts turned to the battle ahead, Shirasaki also thought about Hunter Sano. He sincerely hoped that Sano had survived. Meanwhile, in a corner of Snow Mountain, Sano slowly crawled out of the web ball. He cursed Kurosaki inwardly, realizing that Kurosaki had actually used the Kalesia Dragon Sword's ability. At the very last second, fortunately, Sano had managed to wrap himself in webs. At the crucial moment, he had almost died. But because of that encounter, he now understood how to draw out the sword's power. Looking around, Sano noticed that everything was covered in white. He felt confused and wondered which direction he should even go. Meanwhile, back at the Hunter Association, President Fua told Mr. Shinoda not to worry too much. After all, Shirasaki from the Future Guild was also with them. Takayashi remarked that getting involved with the Blood Tower Guild was always a major problem. They still had far too little information about that man. He added that they had just received a message stating that the Blood Tower Guild seemed to have connections with the Star Stadium Guild. President Fua was shocked and questioned how that was even possible. Mr. Shinoda asked Takeuchi whether he was sure he was talking about the world-class hunter guild, Star Stadium. That dungeon had been part of the dungeon riots during the Great Disaster. 15 years ago, the golems that crawled out back then had been more terrifying than any demon from hell. Hunter Nishimoto Tomoka, one of the world's strongest mages, had been the one to seal them. Without Hunter Nishimoto's sacrifice, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The giant's heart sealed inside that hidden dungeon was now drawing global attention. Both the Star Stadium Guild and the Blood Tower Guild were organizations that would do anything to achieve their goals, so it was not surprising that they would be involved. It was also revealed that Ares, from the International Hunter Association, was actually Hunter Nishimoto's daughter. This time she seemed to want to investigate the truth behind her mother's death. However, Hunter Nishimoto had never been officially declared dead. Mr. Shinoda was shocked and asked what that meant. After all these years, could she possibly still be alive? It was then revealed that 5 years ago, a survivor had actually walked out of that dungeon. He had claimed that he thought he had seen Hunter Nishimoto's figure. The other two were immediately stunned by this revelation. Interestingly, that hidden dungeon actually had several entrances. Just then, someone suddenly burst through the door and reported that something terrible had happened. The dungeon break had occurred. President Fua immediately turned on the television. The screen showed complete chaos. A dungeon outbreak had suddenly erupted. In the city center, large numbers of citizens were fleeing, and the monsters that had appeared were actually Snow Mountain golems. Meanwhile, deep within Snow Mountain, the Blood Tower Guild members were steadily advancing. Erida remarked that was the first time she had ever seen Kurosaki injured and wondered whether there would be problems with their upcoming strategy. Kurosaki replied that it was not something she needed to worry about. Soon everyone arrived at the hidden dungeon's entrance. Unbeknownst to them, Shinoda Satoru used stealth skills to follow closely. Behind them, the Blood Tower Guild personnel approached the dungeon entrance, but they were blocked by an invisible wall. They reported that they could not get through and that they were being blocked Kurosaki thought to himself that the Star Stadium Guild truly lived up to its reputation as a world-class guild. The information they had provided was completely accurate. This was the masterpiece of Nishimoto Tomoka, the strongest mage hunter from 15 years ago. The giant's heart was sealed here in the hidden dungeon. Kurosaki ordered everyone to prepare to break the seal and not to let their guard down. The Blood Tower Guild members immediately scattered to deploy. Arida began preparing the sword for restoration. Just then, Kurosaki seemed to sense someone following them. He wondered who would be foolish enough to sneak around and pursue the Blood Tower Guild. Shinoda Satoru was terrified. He feared that he had been discovered and did not want to die in the very next second. Kurosaki raised his sword and slashed downward. Meanwhile, on the other side of the snowy landscape, a cute little stone golem was hunting. It targeted a snow mountain berserk rabbit. These level 30 creatures live near hidden mazes and often went berserk from hunger, dropping magic stones when defeated. One hit was all it took. A red magic stone immediately dropped. The little stone golem quickly ran over to pick it up, then scurried away and soon reached its master. Its master turned out to be Sono. He praised it for a job well done and told it to eat the stone at his command. The little golem promptly tossed the magic stone into its mouth and began chewing. This little stone golem had actually been created from a shift. Golem's core, injecting magic power into it, created a golem. Its first skill allowed it to freely change its appearance. Its second skill lets it transform into armor to protect its master. The third skill allowed the user to share senses with the golem, including vision and hearing. The higher its level, the wider the range of sensory sharing. And Sono gazed proudly at the core in his hand. He thought that it was incredible. One core created one golem. If he could somehow copy many of these, he could build an army all by himself and solo attack mazes in the future. A snow mountain golem, when upgraded to level 10, could freely change shape and share senses with its master. Just then, the little golem suddenly sensed someone approaching and immediately darted toward the newcomer. It turned out that the newcomer was Shinoda Satoru. Shinoda Satoru saw Sano and excitedly hugged him. He exclaimed that he had thought he would never see him again. He then explained that when he realized the Blood Tower Guild had found the hidden dungeon, he had immediately thought of Sano. He said he'd been extremely scared at first. He thought they had discovered him, but instead they had discovered another stalker, probably a future guild member. He added that there was also a girl with them who appeared to be collecting a large amount of magic power. He explained that she was responsible for reinitializing the dungeon. He admitted that he had thought about stopping her, but had been too scared at the time. He apologized. Sano replied that Shinoda had already done very well. Shinoda then continued, mentioning that the girl had looked very familiar and that he felt like he had seen her before. He also asked whether it was okay for that thing to keep following them. Sano chuckled and said that he had forgotten to introduce it. He explained that it was his little sidekick. Shinoda exclaimed that it was very cute. He said he had not expected Senior Sano to be familiar with a stone golem. As well, soon they arrived at their destination. The hidden dungeon lay just across the bridge. Sano knew that dealing with the Blood Tower Guild would be tough with just the two of them. He instructed Shinoda Satoru to go and bring Nanace and Shirasaki there. He said he would stay behind and monitor them. Shinoda Satoru immediately felt disappointed. He had to part with Senior Sano again so soon. To ensure his safety, Sano gave Shinoda Satoru the Shift Golem's core. He told him that from now on it was his little brother, and warned him not to let its appearance fool him, because it was incredibly strong in battle. Shinoda Satoru was moved to tears. He asked whether Sano could really give him something so precious. Sano thought to himself that it was not that precious at all, and that he actually had an unlimited supply of them. So, Shinoda Satoru left with the core and the little golem. Watching them go, Sano immediately pulled out a new core. He was ready to create a brand new golem, shaping its appearance exactly as he envisioned. Soon a bird-type golem was completed. Through sensory sharing, Sano could clearly see Kurosaki and the others. He watched Arida, who was holding the Collegia Dragon Sword. Magic power continuously spurted out from the collection boxes. Surrounding her, she used her skill, Control Z, to restore the Collegia Dragon Sword's durability. At that moment, the sword's durability was only 6%, and the numbers rapidly changed until they reached 100%. The Collegia Dragon sword's durability was successfully restored. However, using this skill instantly exhausted Erida's stamina. Kurosaki exclaimed that it was enough. He excitedly picked up the sword from the ground. He declared that he could finally use it. To his heart's content, Sano could not believe what he was seeing. He wondered how she had done that, and realized that the sword's durability could actually be restored. He thought that she might be a cursed ability user. Just like him, from the information he had, her ability Control Z could restore all things to their original state. Sono realized that although he could copy skills, they often came with many limitations that made them difficult to use. Even after copying, he looked at Erida and secretly made up his mind that he needed to form an alliance with her first. Meanwhile, Kurosaki held the sword and prepared to destroy the seal. He slowly pierced the barrier with the tip of the sword. Immediately, the seal chains began to clash and rattle. The next second, a huge magic circle appeared beneath Kurosaki's feet. Without the information provided by the Star Stadium Guild, even with the key, they would not have been able to break through the barrier. He inserted the sword into the center of the magic circle. He explained that the only thing that could break this seal was this sword. This seal had been Hunter Nishimoto's masterpiece, created 15 years ago. The original owner of the Collegia Dragon Sword had been her husband. Hunter Nishimoto had set up a barrier that only her husband's sword could break. Her husband was Frederick Shu, the world's greatest sword master. Kurosaki rotated the sword 90 degrees. Immediately, the magic circle began to transform. Dazzling, white light continuously spread from its center. The golems in the air were shattered by this immense power, unable to withstand it gradually. The barrier's power began to recede until it finally dissipated, revealing the true entrance to the hidden dungeon. The hidden dungeon of Golem Snow Mountain had finally reappeared after 15 years. Kurosaki declared that it was time to search for their true objective. Sano watched everything from a distance and then began struggling with a decision. He wondered whether he should follow alone or wait for reinforcements. It was a huge gamble. A new scene unfolded. Inside an S-ranked dungeon to the south, dismembered bodies were scattered everywhere. Across the ground, only one man remained standing nearby, completely intact. The wounded man, lying on the ground, questioned whether his death had been the only target all along, and demanded to know why everyone else had been killed as well. The standing man replied that if he had only killed him, he would have become a murderer. But if he killed everyone, it would simply be considered a dungeon accident. In the very next second, the man on the ground disappeared into a pool of blood. The killer possessed the control skill. When a skill user died, their skill would transfer to the next person who could use it. This meant that by killing him, the standing man had obtained the other man's curse power. Immediately, a sharp pain surged through his neck. 3 hourglass marks appeared there, with the red one clearly being brand new. He instantly sensed his newly acquired power. He activated Control, selecting all targets. Blue inverted triangles immediately appeared above all the dismembered bodies at the scene. Then Control X was activated, targeting them all at once. In the next instant, a massive void tore open in front of him, devouring everything around it. Just then an elf man suddenly appeared behind him. The elf remarked that his skills seemed to have evolved. Once again, instead of erasing targets one by one, its range had clearly expanded significantly. The man replied that to steal curse skills, he had to kill the other person, which truly troubled him. What frustrated him most was that, even after mastering this skill, it still refused to evolve any further. The elf explained that unfortunately, this was the only way to obtain another person's cursed power, unless he could find Control C. The other man responded that they had been searching for Control C for over 10 years without any news, and he was starting to doubt whether Control C really existed at all. The elf insisted that Control C did exist in their dimensional world, and added that the Control F user was also searching for it. He was certain they would hear something soon. Their intelligence indicated that Control H was currently with the Blood Tower Guild. They had likely already broken through the barrier set by Hunter Nishimoto. Control C was important, But more than anything else, they absolutely had to obtain the giant's heart. It was a crucial item that would allow them to fully unleash the potential of their cursed power. They're back inside the hidden dungeon. The group regrouped and began exploring together. There were no signs of enemies anywhere. Not a single monster could be found, making it clear that their targets had not entered. Long ago they knew they had to speed up and catch up to them as quickly as possible. Suddenly Shinoda Satoru's feet began to glow. Someone exclaimed in alarm that it was a magic circle. In an instant, everyone standing within the circle vanished. Everything happened so suddenly that Sano could only watch helplessly as they disappeared before his eyes. Nanisi and Sano rushed anxiously toward the spot. A massive magic circle then lit up on the ground with a dazzling flash of light, and the two of them were instantly transported as well. They landed in a completely unfamiliar place. But Shinoda Satoru and Shirasaki were nowhere to be seen. Sano wondered how they could not be there when they had clearly followed them in immediately. At that moment, a huge monster descended from above, aiming to swallow Sano whole. Nanesse reacted instantly and rushed forward. She swung her blade at the monster, instantly severing its head and resolving the immediate crisis. Ares questioned why there were dinosaur-type monsters in this place, and said it felt like they had been transported to a completely different world. She suggested that this might be a multidimensional maze. Nanisi immediately rejected the idea, stating that she had heard all multidimensional mazes were destroyed during the Great Disaster. 15 years ago, Ares questioned how else they could explain what was happening before them. She pointed out that teleportation magic circles were key markers of multi-dimensional mazes. They created connections between different dimensional spaces, and once a circle was activated, a door to another world would open. Nanase wondered if this was why Hunter Nishimoto had sealed this place. That meant Shinoda, Satoru, and Shirasaki had most likely been transported to another world. If they wanted to reunite with them, they had no choice but to clear this dungeon and reach the location of the giant's heart. With that conclusion reached, Maul declared that they should begin immediately and that the battle was starting now. Meanwhile, in the city center outside the dungeon, chaos erupted. The dungeon had turned red, and large numbers of golems were continuously destroying the urban area. Citizens fled desperately for their lives, while hunters barely managed to resist the onslaught. However, as long as the golem's cores remained intact, they could revive infinitely. Making matters worse, the difference in magic power density between reality and the dungeon made it difficult for mages to cast large-scale spells, severely limiting their combat power. One hunter shouted angrily while fighting, cursing that the so-called left eye was never around when it was needed most. He complained that if they had its infinite magic power generation skill, this battle would be ridiculously easy. Just as a bald warrior found himself in grave danger, a flash of sword light suddenly appeared. A blond man sliced a golem in half with a single strike. The reason he had shown up was because he had overheard their conversation. He asked what that infinite magic power generation was that they had mentioned earlier. To repay the favor, the bald warrior told the blond man everything he knew. At that moment, two massive sources of magic power suddenly appeared on the rooftop of the association building. It was the presidents of Japan's two strongest guilds. A huge golem was heading straight toward them. Shinoda Shiro stated that it looked like it was up to them, and that if they did not act now, the casualties would only grow worse. Takeuchi Go immediately jumped down, activating his stone armor skill. In an instant, Takeuchi Go was covered from head to toe in stone. After a loud crash, the transformed Takeuchi Go emerged from the smoke. By that time, the golem had already arrived with just one light punch. Takeuchi Go shattered it. Then he charged forward with overwhelming momentum. Shinoda Shiro also began contributing, launching a magical bombardment. A brilliant blast of magical energy struck the ground, clearing a path for Takeuchi to smoothly reach the boss. The boss swung its massive fist at Takeuchi Go, but he did not dodge instead. He raised his own fist to meet it head-on. One punch, the boss's body gradually cracked. In the next instant, it shattered into fragments, revealing the red core inside. Takeuchi Go declared that he would not let that old man claim the boss for himself. With that, he crushed the core into powder. The dungeon riot was successfully quelled. However, while everyone was still celebrating, the blonde man from earlier had already gathered some intelligence. He used his Control F skill on Takayashi Go to read his stats. He then commented that Takayashi Go truly lived up to his reputation as the president of the nation's #1 guild, quelling the dungeon riot in just a few minutes. Meanwhile, to obtain the giant's heart, members of the Blood Tower Guild ventured into the depths of the hidden dungeon. Unexpectedly, countless zombies appeared. Unfortunately for them, these monsters were nothing compared to the legendary sword. Kurosaki simply swung his blade once, wiping them all out with the monsters cleared. They continued toward the boss room of the giant. Puppet Heart immediately. A dazzling white light rose beneath everyone's feet. In the next instant, they were transported in front of a massive stone door. Kurosaki immediately took out the key he had seized earlier and inserted it into the keyhole. As the door opened, everyone walked inside. The room's walls were lined with rows of enormous statues. No boss could be found anywhere, however. Only Erida felt an indescribable pressure pressing down on her, making it hard for her to breathe. She wondered if it was because she was not a hunter, just as one member was still puzzled. A gigantic palm slammed down with a sickening impact. The unfortunate member was crushed into a pool of meat. One of the statues had come to life and now stood before them. One of the members cursed in panic, shouting that the statue was moving and warning everyone to be careful. But it was already too late. The surrounding statues had all come to life, encircling the Blood Tower Guild members. Erida froze in shock at this sudden turn of events. This sight immediately enraged Kurosaki. He demanded to know what she was standing there for, and ordered her to quickly use her restoration skills to save their fallen comrade. Rita finally realized she was the team's healer. She rushed over immediately, pulling out the magic power devices she had collected. From her backpack, however, she was horrified to discover that magic power was leaking out of them. She could not understand how this was possible, since even advanced mages could not break the seals on these devices. Worse still, all the magic power seemed to be flowing in the same direction. By then, the Blood Tower Guild members had already begun fighting the statues, but they were clearly outmatched. Kurosaki frantically ordered his teammates to use landmines, but something was terribly wrong. Neither stealth skills nor landmines could be activated properly. When the statues struck again, Kurosaki's eyes widened in shock as his teammate was killed right in front of him. In mere moments, all the other Blood Tower Guild members had perished. As well, Kurosaki raged in disbelief, cursing the statues and questioning how this could be happening. He raised his sword, preparing to unleash a powerful skill. But a notification suddenly popped up, stating that the user lacked mana to release the Collegia Dragon sword skill. The message stunned him, as Kurosaki stood there in confusion. The statue's next attack was already descending. Meanwhile, on the other side of the chamber, Erida followed the flow of magic power to a raised platform. All the magic power was being absorbed by a cube. At the center, she could not comprehend what it was. The moment Erida touched the cube, a massive ruby heart was revealed. She wondered if this could be the giant's heart, but questioned why it was absorbing magic power instead of releasing it just then. The giant's heart suddenly reacted. Sensing danger, Erida turned and ran immediately. But it was already too late. A red beam shot out from the heart and pierced straight through her waist. She collapsed to the ground in agony. The statue walked over, raised its blade high, and brought it down with full force. At that critical moment, Kurosaki used shadow movement to arrive just in time, blocking the attack aimed at Erida. He immediately pulled out a high-grade healing potion and sprinkled it over her wound. Then he picked her up, planning to leave at once. However, a notification sounded. The giant's heart had been activated and was now preparing for a boss battle. The door began to slowly close. Kurosaki immediately tried to activate shadow movement again, but another notification appeared, stating that the user lacked sufficient magic power to activate the skill. He could not believe what was happening, but his magic power had vanished completely. If they did not escape now, they would both die at this rate. They would be trapped there forever. With no other choice left, Kurosaki grabbed Erida and hurled her toward the exit with all his strength. she slid roughly across the ground, while crying out and asking why he had chosen to save her. Kurosaki told her that as long as she was alive, she could restore everything. Erida angrily called him an idiot and said she was not a hunter, asking where she was supposed to find that much magic power. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Sano standing before her. It was that same man. He seemed capable of sharing his magic power with others. And Sano did exactly that, continuously transmitting magic power into her body. He asked her that if she had enough magic power, she should be able to heal her injuries. Erida stared at him wide-eyed in shock, unable to understand how he knew about her skill. A few minutes later, a fully healed Erida sat quietly nearby. Her hands were bound. As a prisoner and as the Blood Tower Guild's healer, she had suffered fatal injuries, yet she had recovered completely in such a short time. Someone remarked that her background would need to be thoroughly investigated. Once they got back, another asked what they should do now. They had worked so hard to reach this place, yet they could not even open the door. There was no way to open it from the outside, and they would need a key. That meant they would be trapped there forever. They wondered if this was why so many people had gone missing. Nearby, Sano was still struggling with a thought. He had actually copied the key earlier, but he had no idea how to explain it. In the end, he decided to just make something up. Sono then took out the key, but at that very moment, Ares stepped forward and gently placed her hand on the door. To everyone's shock, her arm passed straight through it. Both the door and Ares's robe lit up with identical runes. In the next second, the door simply opened. It turned out that the robe belonged to Ares's mother. It resonated with the door, allowing it to open nearby. Sano overheard their conversation and realized that Ares truly was the key to this maze. He thought that if he ever got the chance, he absolutely had to investigate this multi-dimensional dungeon together with her. According to Erida, Sarah's intelligence, everyone quickly realized that their magic power was being rapidly drained away. The giant's heart was continuously absorbing it. Just then the statues from before reappeared. Sano immediately began casting. He copied magic power and then pasted it. He continuously used Ctrl-V for infinite pasting. Suddenly, countless skill dialog boxes filled the entire area. Terrifying amounts of magic power erupted from Sano's body, quickly filling the entire area. Even the giant's heart's absorption speed could not keep up with how fast he was generating magic. Erida watched the scene in utter disbelief. She realized that if she could combine her skill with his, she might be able to restore her parents to normal. Ninasi, having recovered her magic power, immediately charged toward a statue. With one swift strike, she sliced it in half at the waist. Shirasaki was not about to be outdone. He raised his staff and unleashed dark magic. Dark lightning instantly destroyed the nearest statue. Just then, more statues surrounded them. Shirasaki grew even more excited. He declared that he would use them to vent the terrible mood he had been in. Lately, he then unleashed a massive dark magic spell, instantly obliterating all the statues. At that moment, Erida spotted the defeated Kurosaki. He was sitting on the ground, covered in wounds and barely clinging to life. Erida was about to step forward to help him, but Sano got there first. Sano remarked that he had not expected Kurosaki to end up here. He then picked up the Kalesia dragon sword from the ground. He realized that he had finally gotten it back, and just as expected, its durability had been fully restored. He wondered how he could copy Kurosaki's skill. Sano decided to first try copying Kurosaki's shadow movement. A system message appeared, stating that the copy had failed because the target's level was higher than his own. Just as Sano was about to give up, another prompt appeared. It stated that the target held strong hostility toward him. In this situation, there were two ways to obtain the skill. One was to kill the opponent and gain their skill. The second was to forcibly absorb the target's skill, which was only possible when the target's HP was below 15%. After absorption, the target would lose that skill. Sano realized that skills could be absorbed this way, as well with Kurosaki's current condition. He knew he could forcibly absorb it. After a while, Shirasaki also walked over to Erida and asked whether she was a healer. He told her to heal Kurosaki because they had very important questions to ask him. With that, he released Erida's restraints. As her healing skill activated, Kurosaki's second arm slowly began to regenerate. In the very next second, he awakened. He muttered that it seemed his decision had not been wrong. After all, immediately after that, his hands were bound again. Nanace warned him to behave himself and said not to blame her if she got rude. Kurosaki replied that he understood, but added that first, they needed to get out of there alive, because the dungeon had only just begun. Suddenly the giant's heart on the platform unleashed another dazzling beam of light. Kurosaki quickly ducked to dodge it, and then fled rapidly. The beam shot straight toward Nanace, instantly destroying the entire area around her. Seeing this, Shinoda Satoru rushed over. Just then, the heart fired another beam directly at Shinoda Satoru. At this critical moment, Little Stone Golem raced forward at lightning speed. In the next second, a massive explosion tore through the air. When the smoke cleared, a figure emerged. Shinoda Satoru was completely covered in stone armor, which was Little Stone's transformed form. Nanace also stood behind him, looking disheveled. Sano exclaimed in shock that the two of them had merged, and that they had actually managed to level up. In such a short time, Shirasaki thought to himself that, no matter how many times he saw it, it still looked just like Master Takeuchi's stone armor skill. With his powerful dark skill, Shirasaki instantly eliminated the remaining monsters. There they even dropped a large number of rubies, which Little Stone Golem found extremely appetizing. It sat down and began chewing them voraciously. Just like that, Little Stone Golem leveled up. Its status read that it was now a Snow Mountain Golem. At level 2, capable of growing up to level 10. It currently possessed free form change level 2, and the ability to share senses with its master. At level 2, Shinoda Satoru praised Little Stone, calling it amazing, and expressing shock that it had leveled up. Back in the present, the giant's heart's attacks grew increasingly fierce. They were so powerful that even Shirasaki's protective barrier eventually shattered. These beams were made of high-density magic power, and ordinary, defensive magic simply could not withstand them. Just then a furious Nanace stepped forward. She showed no fear and directly swung her sword to split the beam that was about to strike her. Sano realized that, because the beam's density was so high, it could actually be split with a sword. However, even with that, they still could not get close. He thought that, since he could generate infinite magic power, the giant's heart would just keep absorbing it and firing beams. But if he stopped generating magic power, their own magic would quickly be drained. Either way, it was a dead end. There was only one option left. He decided to try his newly acquired skill, Shadow Movement, if he used its ability to move through Spider Silk shadows and combined it with Control V. By activating Giant King Spider Silk, he might have a chance. Sano surrounded himself with Spider Silk and instantly vanished from his spot, leaving behind only a faint trace of silk. Maul, who had been standing next to him, looked completely confused and wondered where he had gone. A human-shaped shadow appeared behind the giant's heart. Sano emerged from it and immediately placed his hand on the heart. He planned to shatter it using inherent vibration. However, he had underestimated its intelligence. The heart used magic power to create an explosion, instantly blasting Sano backward until he coughed up blood. Even so, he charged again. He thought about how that was the magic power he himself had given it, and reminded himself of that fact. He activated Control V and unleashed Giant King Spider Silk instantly. Massive amounts of spider silk formed and continuously wrapped around the giant's heart until it was encased in a huge cylinder. Just when everyone thought they had succeeded, beams shot out from inside it again. It was not over yet. Sono activated Control plus V and triggered Giant King Spider Silk Super Double. Several beams brushed past him. He realized that this time he had to touch it. The moment he made contact, he wrapped it up again. He activated Control V and used the skill Inherent Vibration, applying resonance to destroy the target. As the giant's heart shattered, a brilliant light burst forth. A system message popped up, announcing that the giant's heart had been destroyed, and that the dungeon had been successfully cleared. In the next second, countless level up notification boxes appeared before Sano's eyes. He looked at them with immense joy. Another message followed, congratulating him on obtaining the Conquest reward. The giant golem's heart level 1 upgradable. Its first ability could generate magic power infinitely. Its second skill could absorb or store a certain amount of magic power. It was a continuously upgradable skill. Looking at the description, Sano suddenly felt that it seemed useless to him. Then another notification appeared. Control-C had been upgraded. It could now automatically copy copiable objects. This realization amazed him completely. Shinoda's Satoru came running over, calling Sano absolutely incredible. Sano immediately told him not to get close, and said he did not like men. At that moment, Shirasaki walked over and seriously congratulated Sano on obtaining the giant's heart. He said that after they returned, he would like to talk with him. However, Sano simply walked past, saying that if Shirasaki wanted the giant's heart, he could sell it to him at a high price. Shirasaki became extremely excited by the offer. After some rest and reorganization, Sano returned the Kalesia dragon sword to Ares. Suddenly, Maul stepped forward and asked whether Sano had just used the Blood Tower Guild's advanced skill. He pointed out that Sano had moved a great distance. Just now, Sano immediately broke out in a cold sweat and quickly made up an excuse, saying that he had used spider silk to pull himself over quickly. Maul was about to say more, but Nanace interrupted him. She stated that asking about someone's skills was very rude. She told everyone to leave and said that they still needed to hurry back and investigate those two people. As they walked, Kurosaki quietly spoke to Erida. He told her that it was time to repay the life-saving debt she owed him and ordered her to restart the dungeon. Erida hesitated and asked whether he was sure, saying this would be the last time. Kurosaki asked if it was because of that infinite magic power kid. He told her not to forget the contract, or he would have a headache. He reminded her that the contract was Adam's oath, a permanent binding. That meant she could never betray her partner. As long as it existed, she could never leave him. He warned her to remember that her parents were in his hands. He said he had used his own life to save her back then, and now it was her turn to repay him. This place had enough magic power, so she had to start now, the next second. Magic power began gathering around her. She then activated her control skill. Sano saw this and immediately turned, shouting for everyone to leave quickly. He warned that the dungeon was about to be reset. He then used shadow movement and instantly appeared beside Erida's Sarah. Hoping to stop her, he asked why she was doing this. She apologized as the magic power activated. The entire dungeon began undergoing earth-shattering changes. Shirasaki and Ares immediately deployed protective barriers, shielding everyone as they raced toward the exit. They successfully escaped, just as the maze was about to close, reaching the city above and outside the dungeon. Just then the maze exit completely closed. Shinoda Satoru shouted anxiously that they were still inside. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, things had not completely reset. Kurosaki had already freed himself from his restraints. Holding his sword, he slowly approached and asked what was going on. He realized the dungeon had not completely reset. Erida explained that this guy had pulled her out while she was activating the skill, so the reset had been cancelled. Halfway through, Kurosaki mused that he understood. He said it did not matter anyway, because the others were all gone. As long as he could get the giant's heart, everything would be fine. Sano looked angrily at his opponent and planned to use the Giant King spider skill. However, in the next second, he stared in disbelief at a dialogue box that appeared. It read, "Cannot find object." He wondered what that meant. Kurosaki explained that it was useless. What had been reset was not just the maze, but Sono himself as well. Hearing this, Sono immediately brought up his information panel. It showed Sono Haruto at level 1, with skill proficiency level 1. Both Control-C and Control-V had returned to their initialized state. Then Sono noticed something else. His panel also showed that an unconfirmed object had been copied. Could be pasted the next second. A sword light flashed as blood splattered. Kurosaki directly slashed Sano. Severely wounding him, he sneered and said goodbye. Little brat, he then swung his sword down again. Just then another sword blocked Kurosaki's attack. It was Maul who had also been left behind. However, Maul was clearly no match for Kurosaki. Kurosaki smiled evilly after several rounds of fighting. Maul was quickly defeated. Kurosaki delivered a hard kick, sending him flying. Kurosaki rushed forward, poised to deliver a fatal blow to Maul. But Sano threw himself in the way, taking the hit and falling heavily to the ground. Maul stared at Sano in disbelief. Kurosaki sliced him in half from behind. Everyone watched the scene in disbelief. Sano had just died looking at Erida's Sarah. Kurosaki said that he had known only this guy. Himself was reset. He sneered that the things on him were still here, and that he was now the only person she could rely on. He told her not to look at him with that expression. He added that Sano was like this because she had restored him to his initial state, and that he was sure Sano would thank her in the next life. The next second, a sword light flashed. Kurosaki's wrist was severed, and he let out a painful scream. Then Sano appeared completely unharmed. Right in front of him, everyone looked on in disbelief what was going on, shouting that he had clearly cut him in half with his own hands, and demanding to know what kind of skill this was. Grabbing his sword, Kurosaki lunged at Sano. Just then, Sano activated Giant King Spider Thread. The threads instantly wrapped around Kurosaki. He tried to use shadow movement to break free, but a system message popped up stating that this skill had been removed and could not be used. Kurosaki stared, wide-eyed at the prompt in the dialogue box. Too many unbelievable things were happening before him. He demanded that Erida to restart the dungeon once more. However, Erida no longer wanted to be an accomplice. Kurosaki snarled, asking if she had forgotten about their contract, and ordering her to move quickly if she did not want to die. At that moment, the contract bracelet on Erida's hand pulsed, with electric currents, threatening her if she did not comply. Sano noticed this change, and realized that this was why she was bound, because of a contract bracelet. With a single step, Sano instantly appeared beside Erida. Grabbing her wrist, he activated Control C, an inherent vibration. The next second, the contract bracelet shattered. The shackles in Erida's heart seemed to break. Along with the bracelet from that moment on, she was completely free from Kurosaki's control. Sano declared that now, Kurosaki could not command anyone. He told him to go to hell in despair. The next second, Sano used the shadow movement skill to instantly appear in front of Kurosaki. He vowed that today he would use Kurosaki's own skill to kill him. Kurosaki immediately disconnected. Sano picked up the giant golem's heart from the ground. He wondered aloud how many people Kurosaki had killed for this thing, and declared that scum like him had no right to possess it. He then used a skill to crush the giant's heart into powder. A system message appeared, stating that he had destroyed a high-level reward item, and congratulating him on obtaining a unique treasure. Inside the Japan Hunter Association building, a group of people were discussing the recent dungeon incident. It turned out that the Golem Snow Mountain dungeon was actually a multi-dimensional dungeon. This was extremely alarming because the great disaster 15 years ago had been preceded by the explosion of similar multidimensional dungeons. They had never expected such dungeons to reappear, especially with the seal on the Western Hunter also being lifted. This was a serious matter that required immediate attention. However, the 7 hunters present did not seem interested in the discussion at all. They only wanted to leave as soon as possible, prioritizing the investigation of the Blood Tower members. To them, multi-dimensional dungeons were an unsolvable problem. At the moment, this dismissive attitude truly angered Takeuchi Go. He scoffed sarcastically and questioned how impressive they thought they were. He asked whether they believed nothing had been done while they were away. Takeuchi then stood up and walked straight towards Sano. He said he had heard that Sano had conquered the dungeon, and pressed him, asking why he had never heard of him, if he truly had such ability. He demanded to know exactly who Sano was. Sano calmly replied that he was just a hunter, and asked what Takeuchi was planning to do. He continued by stating that not only had they conquered the dungeon, but they had also discovered a very dangerous multidimensional dungeon. While it might not be a groundbreaking achievement, it certainly did not warrant this kind of treatment. He then asked whether Takeuchi agreed, addressing him as Master Takeuchi. Takeuchi narrowed his eyes and said that Sano was interesting, noting that he still dared to speak to him in that tone, even after knowing his identity. In an instant, Takeuchi activated his stone armor skill. The ordinary people nearby immediately panicked at the sudden surge of power. Fortunately, the Hunter Association president was present and quickly stepped in to calm the situation. Takayuki reluctantly backed down and left the meeting room. The scene then shifted to the Hunter Association. President's office. The president explained that he had once been a member of the Great Sage Guild himself, but had left for certain reasons. He then added that he represented all hunters and wanted to thank Sano for his contribution. This time, Sano was clearly happy to be recognized by President Fua. Standing next to Sano, Eri stated his intention to return to the International Hunter Association to report the matter. Mal, however, announced that he planned to stay there for a while. He declared that he was planning to quit the International Hunter Association that night. Everyone gathered at Sano's home. Sano asked why they were all at his house so late. Mal replied that he was no longer a member of the International Hunter Association and had nowhere else to stay, so he would just borrow a spot at Sano's place. For a while, Ares pressed him, asking why he was doing this. Mal apologized, but said that he could not tell him. Shinoda Satoru chimed in next, saying that he had come to play with Sano-senpai. Then Nanase said that she was only there to convey Eridus-Sera's request and told them not to lump her in with the others. They explained that Kurosaki was still in a coma because Eridus-Sera had refused to use her healing skill. Once Kurosaki woke up, he would be transferred to prison for interrogation. Eridus-Sera herself was currently being held in the Hunter Association's interrogation room. She had maintained complete silence, with her only request being to meet Sano. They also mentioned that Eridus-Sera was a member of an idol girl group. Sano speculated that she had probably been forced into it. He noted that he had destroyed her contract bracelet, so she should no longer have any ties to Kurosaki. Sano decided that he would go to the association. To see her later, he then turned to another guest and asked why Master Shirasaki was also in his room. Shirasaki replied that he was there for only one reason. However, Mal, who was standing beside him, quickly interrupted and warned him not to even think about the giant's heart. He declared that Hunter Sano had already destroyed it in the maze. This statement shocked everyone in the room. Shirasaki exclaimed in disbelief, questioning whether Sano was crazy and asking why he would destroy such a rare item. But in the very next second, the giant's heart suddenly appeared in Sano's hand. Sano calmly explained that what he had destroyed in the dungeon had actually been fake. He thought to himself that it had only been a copy, though it was practically indistinguishable from the real thing. Mal stared in disbelief at the heart in Sano's hand. He thought that it was impossible and that he could personally confirm that what had been destroyed at the time had been the real heart. Both Shirasaki and Nanase immediately offered astronomical prices to obtain the giant's heart. In the end, Shirasaki's massive offer of $20 billion finally sealed the deal. Later that night, Sano was happily contemplating the fortune that would soon be his. He wondered that if he simply used his skill to copy a bunch of giants' hearts and auction them on the overseas black market, he would instantly become rich. The thought made him incredibly excited. What a great haul this was. His level had already exceeded 300, and he had also obtained a unique reward. The item was currently sealed, but it could be unsealed by injecting magic power. Curious, Sano immediately poured a large amount of magic power into it. Suddenly, a triangular item appeared. It was a dimensional fragment, 1 of 5. If all the dimensional fragments were collected, they could be synthesized into a dimensional key. This key would open the door to any dimension. These fragments also had the ability to attract each other. Sano looked at the item in confusion. It seemed useless for now, and what was worse, it could not even be copied. He had no idea how he was supposed to collect the other fragments. Just then Mal walked in and said there was something he needed to confirm. He then drew his long sword. Sano immediately panicked at the sight and asked what he was doing. Mal did not answer. Instead, he raised his sword to strike and plunged it towards Sano's heart. Blood spurted out 15 years ago during the Great Disaster in Europe. A terrifying giant beast had rampaged through a city. It was a lower horn dragon, level 500 plus. Its abilities were said to be equivalent to those of higher horn dragons. This monster had a fire attribute, so mages were advised to use ice magic against it. A mage flew forward after several flips and dodges. He reached a spot behind the dragon. Raising his magic circle, he immediately cast ice magic. However, several ice spikes were blocked by the dragon's wings, rendering them completely ineffective. Instead, the dragon's impact pushed him back several meters. The mage cursed, wondering where such a superclass monster had come from, and realizing they were no match for it at all. The lower horned dragon then opened its mouth wide and breathed out massive flames. The scorching fire quickly engulfed the nearest hunters. Soon huge explosions erupted throughout the city. Hunters watching from afar were so terrified that they turned and ran. The entire city felt like it had been plunged into hell. As a newly awakened rookie hunter, Maul felt completely doomed. Just then a man appeared before him, suddenly giving hope to his despairing heart. It was the world's greatest hunter, Frederick Shu. Maul thought about thanking him for saving him, however. In the very next second, Frederick was swallowed whole by the lower horned dragon. Only half his body remained left standing there. Maul was scared pale and collapsed limply on the ground. Just then, the lower horned dragon seemed to undergo the mutation. Painful roars echoed across the land as its entire body began to swell. Finally, its whole body exploded in a massive blast. Huge shock waves swept over everything. At that moment, the man appeared again, once more standing in front of Maul. Maul was completely shocked and exclaimed that he was actually fine, saying he had clearly seen it with his own eyes. Just moments ago, when he looked at where the corpse had been, only some black charcoal remained. Scattering in the wind, a voice scolded Frederick, asking why he had been told not to use that move in front of outsiders. Only then did Maul realize there was a female mage standing right behind him. She was the one who had saved him from the explosion. Frederick explained that it had been an emergency and that it was the fastest way to defeat that monster. He said the lower horned dragon scales were incredibly hard, and normal attacks had no effect on it. If they had left it alone, the entire country would have been destroyed. He asked whether Maul had seen it, and hoped Maul could help him keep this secret. Gradually, Hunter started approaching the area. Seeing this, Frederick turned to leave. He said goodbye, and expressed hope that when they met again, Maul would have grown into a great hunter. Maul hurried forward and introduced himself, saying he was Maul Grant from the Grant family, and that he was a recently awakened hunter. He asked Frederick to remember him. Frederick replied that he would remember Maul Grant. However, what Maul had not expected was that, after Frederick's disappearance, he would meet someone with the same skill. Maul admitted that he knew this was rash, but he wanted to personally verify whether his guess was correct. Raising his hand, he swung the blade and stabbed toward Sano. The moment Sano died, his body turned to ash and scattered. Then Sano revived, appearing behind Maul. Sano asked why he had killed him. Maul breathed a sigh of relief, proving his guess had been correct. He apologized and said that no matter what, he had wanted to see this skill with his own eyes. Sano asked whether Maul had not been afraid. His guess might be wrong, and what if he had really died? At that moment, Shinoda Satoru appeared at the door and witnessed the entire scene. Sano said that things were getting more and more troublesome. After some explanation and apology, Maul decided to serve at Sano's side as compensation. Ares said that there really was a skill for resurrection from death, and Shinoda Satoru wondered if this was why Senpai was so powerful. This made Shinoda Satoru extremely excited. Sano said they should put this aside for now. He then asked Ares why she had not gone home and how she had come back. Ares explained that it was because of that thing. Sano looked in surprise at the item in Ares' hand. While Ares had been on her way home, the fragment she carried had suddenly reacted. Following its guidance, she had returned there. The fragment in Sano's hand was number 5. The one in Ares' hand was number 1. Sano said that his was a unique reward he had gotten from destroying the giant's heart, and Ares said that hers was her mother's relic. According to the notes her mother had left behind, fragments attracted each other now. It had been confirmed this meant it would be easier to obtain the other fragments in the future. Shinoda Satoru asked what exactly this thing was for. Ares explained that if all the fragments were collected, they could synthesize a key to the dimensional gate. It would be like the multi-dimensional dungeon they had experienced this time. If they possessed this key, they could move freely in multi-dimensional space. Sano asked whether she had come to Japan, not only to find her mother, but also to collect information about dimensional fragments. Aries answered that she believed her parents were still alive in another dimension. She said she did not believe they would die so easily. That meant they might currently be trapped in another dimension, or there was some reason they could not return. If that was the case, the reason might be more terrifying than the great disaster 15 years ago. Anyway, as long as they had the dimensional key, they could close multi-dimensional dungeons and prevent great disasters. But how did this thing become a key? Just then, little stone golem lightly touched the fragment. Instantly, the corners of the two fragments attracted each other. Then they emitted a dazzling light. After the light faded, the fragments were completely joined together. So that was how they connected. The resonance between them was even more intense than before. Meanwhile, at the European headquarters of the Star Stadium Guild, the elf man suddenly noticed his dimensional fragment reacting. A sinister smile spread across his face as he thought that it looked like he could finally go home. Just then, a white-haired man suddenly appeared behind him and asked what he was laughing about. He added that the Blood Tower Guild guys had not responded and that it looked like the mission had failed. Seeing the other person, the elf man immediately knelt down and addressed him as Mr. Michael. He congratulated Michael on finally obtaining Control X, saying that now he could move freely and that he had taken another step on the path to becoming a transcendent. Michael replied that he could currently only use it for short-distance movement and that he needed to use C to make it evolve. He then reassured him that this might be realized very soon. He explained that the dimensional fragments had just resonated, and that two of them should have connected. He added that the one in his hand would tell them where the other pieces were. The elf man asked whether that meant Michael could go home soon. He then asked whether Michael's world had its own dimensional key. Michael clarified that there was one, but that it was currently impossible to open the dimensional gate. From the other side, he said that 15 years ago, it had all been because of that damn mage, the Western Hunter. All dimensional gates connected to Blue Star had been sealed, and the multi-dimensional key on Blue Star had also been split into 5 pieces and sealed in different places. Once they collected these fragments and lifted the seal, the dimensional gate would open again. Michael continued that then they could go to his homeland Fairyland. They would open the dimensional gate to the Sacred World Tree. There was a reward similar to Control C there, and if he absorbed it, it would benefit him greatly. The elf man said that it sounded good, but asked whether this was really the same as the Control Key. Michael scoffed and said that the elf man had also been very surprised when he had first seen his skill. He asked whether the elf man thought. He did not know what he was after. He said that the elf man's homeland was the elves' country and that its world tree had been contaminated. Hundreds of years ago now, it was called the Dark Tree. Worst of all, it was now on the verge of destruction. Michael continued that during the Great Disaster, 15 years ago, Blue Star and the elves' dimension had overlapped for the first time. The elves had tried to transfer the source of contamination to Blue Star, but the Western Hunter had stopped them. He then pressed the elf man, asking what exactly he wanted. He asked whether the elves would continue their failed plan to reconnect the two worlds and whether the elf man was using him to achieve his own goals. The elf man immediately broke into a cold sweat. He felt very guilty and was just about to make excuses. But the white-haired man suddenly said that he actually did not care about this at all. He said he just wanted to use the elf man to open more multi-dimensional worlds and absorb more skills, becoming like those transcendents. He added that he did not care what happened to this world, and that from now on he would act personally. Hearing this, the elf man immediately panicked and exclaimed that Michael could not leave yet. He said that Michael was the leader of the Star Stadium Guild, and if he left without a proper reason, he might attract some unwanted attention. Michael calmly stated that he had already considered this possibility. He said that he had ordered Lucas to execute Plan B. Once preparations were complete, they would have sufficient reason to let him act freely. Meanwhile, in Japan, Sano brought Shinoda Satoru and Maul to conquer a high-level maze called the Forest of Death. Their target was the Noel, a level 90 monster that fused fairy and wolf. Although their individual combat ability was low, they were very intelligent and usually appeared in groups, making them very dangerous. Shinoda nervously said that this seemed like too many enemies and that there were only 3 of them. Sano scoffed and said that this was a great place for grinding. He excitedly began provoking the nearby gnolls, asking what they were waiting for. and telling them to come attack him. This immediately enraged the opponents. Shinoda was almost in tears, asking what Sano-senpai was doing. The next second, all the Noels charged forward. Sano activated Control V and used a Shift Golem core to summon a golem. He kept using the skill, quickly summoning an entire army of little golems. They charged straight toward the Noels. Shinoda and Maul watched the scene in amazement. Maul wondered how Senpai had so many cores. Sano just smiled and told them to enjoy the performance. Maul wondered what exactly his skill was, since he could actually summon so many golems. Soon both sides were locked in a fierce battle. The golem army charged forward with crushing force, instantly sending a large group of gnolls flying. Sano mused that they looked like a bunch of delinquents, and that his little stone must never learn from them. The battle ended quickly. Sano crouched down and petted a golem, thanking it for its hard work. Then he recalled them and opened his system inventory to check something. He muttered that he did not have enough space to create a golem squad and decided to forget about it for now, saying it was time to go see Irida. They would soon reach the Hunter Association's interrogation room. Inside, only Irida Sarah sat quietly. She had not eaten for 3 days. No matter what they asked, she remained silent, only saying she wanted to see Sano. Sano asked whether their conversation could be kept private. Anesi replied apologetically that, given the nature of the investigation, they could not meet his request. Sano brought a cup of water inside and asked if she was thirsty, saying they would talk after she drank. Irida glanced at him, then picked up the cup and drank it down. Sano asked whether she wanted to know what his skill was exactly, saying it was no secret and that his skill was infinite mana generation. Irida then said that if he could help her, she would cooperate with the investigation. Sano then said that before that, he needed to confirm something. He asked whether she had the ability to restore everything. Call Control Z. Irida confirmed that it was a cursed ability. Sano mused that he knew he was not the only one cursed. He then realized that, in other words, he could copy and paste her skill. That meant he could copy and paste any control skill. In the future, the conversation inside surprised those listening outside. Restoration curse. Control skill. They wondered what they were talking about. Ares wondered aloud whether such skills really existed. He said that the girl's skill was not healing. It was restoration, and that no wonder. The durability of the Colesia. Dragon sword recovered Irida. Sarah continued, saying that her parents were in a coma. She said she needed a massive amount of mana to restore them, and that Sano was the only one who could provide such enormous mana. She pleaded for his help. Sano replied that he understood, and that he could provide however much mana she needed. In exchange, he said that he needed her too. That he placed his hand on her handcuffs. Everyone outside looked puzzled, wondering what Sano was trying to do. The next second, Sano activated Control C to copy the target skill. However, unexpectedly, the system prompted that copying was impossible. Sana was confused and wondered why this was happening. He thought that he had considered before that there might be skills that could not be copied, but he never expected to encounter one today. He cursed his bad luck. Irida stared at her hand, which he was gripping tightly. She felt bewildered and asked what he was doing. Sono then realized what he was doing and quickly let go of her hand. Suddenly a red dialog box popped up. It read that Control C skills and special skills could not be copied, however. If the user eliminated the target, the skill could be absorbed. Sano felt extremely depressed. After seeing such a cruel rule, he thought that he could not just kill someone for a skill and wondered if there was no other way. He even thought that maybe he could wait until she died of old age and then absorb it outside. But everyone watched, puzzled by what was happening inside. Ninesi could not watch any longer and quickly asked what was going on inside. Sano quickly replied that he was sorry and that he had just been spacing out, saying everything was going smoothly in there. He then decided to forget it and help wake up her parents first to gain her trust. He thought that maybe he would find a better way soon. That same afternoon, Everyone gathered at Hunter Center Hospital. Many people had been attacked by mysterious creatures during the Great Disaster, resulting in mana poisoning. This hospital was the only one accepting such patients. Sano questioned Erida, asking whether this was why she needed to cooperate with Kurosaki. She explained that she needed a lot of money for treatment. Sano then wondered whether Kurosaki was also receiving treatment here now. Nanace replied that he was in the underground facility, and that once he woke up, he would be taken to prison for investigation. Just then a man brushed past Maul. Maul wondered why this guy was here. It was Lucas, the one who used Control F. The scene then shifted to Lucas. As he arrived at the underground facility, 2 guards quickly stepped forward to stop him. They announced that this was a restricted area, and that entry without permission was prohibited. Lucas confidently pulled out a small card and thanked them both for their hard work, saying this was his permit. However, what was actually written on the card was Control F. In the next second, the text began to change. Countless black energy emerged from the card, quickly attacking the 2 guards. It soon engulfed them completely. After this baptism of black energy, the 2 guards were completely controlled. They became mindless puppets. Lucas walked straight in making his way to Kurosaki. Then he took out a strange orb. Its surface was wrapped in purple leaves, and it continuously emitted black energy. The scene briefly shifted to a previous meeting. With the Elf Man had told Lucas that there was something only he could do. He said that if the Blood Tower Guild failed, he wanted Lucas to deploy this throughout City C. Lucas had seen this thing and instinctively felt disgusted. He had quickly stepped back. The Elf Man had continued, explaining that this was a fruit brought from his homeland, a fruit from a contaminated world tree. Using this fruit as a barrier, they could open a subspace. The Elf Man had added that Lucas might not know what subspace was, and said he would show him now. The scene before Lucas's eyes at that time had filled him with terror. The Elfman's fruit had already opened a portal. The space above was torn open, revealing a terrifying giant beast inside. Back in the present, Lucas looked at the purple fruit in his hand. He thought that that guy wanted to turn the entire city into hell. He cursed and thought that he needed to save people first. He thought that they were too closely related to his family, and that now was not the time to back down. Upstairs in the hospital room, Erida Sarah's parents had successfully recovered. Shinoda Satoru was moved to tears by this heartwarming scene. Nanae suddenly had some ideas. After witnessing this miraculous skill, she wondered whether restoration was truly more powerful than the strongest healers, and thought that she needed to find a way to keep this girl in the association. Sano then questioned where Maul had gone. Meanwhile, in the hospital corridor, Lucas had already freed Kurosaki and was leading him out just then. A system dialog box popped up in front of Lucas, stating that a control skill user had been detected. Nearby, Kurosaki was surprised to hear this and wondered if Sarah was coming to see her parents and whether that other guy was with her too. Suddenly, Maul appeared behind them, saying it really was Lucas and that he had almost not recognized him, also remarking that Kurosaki was actually awake. Lucas told Maul that he had heard. He quit the Hunter Association and asked what he was doing here now. Maul continued that, since Lucas was helping Kurosaki escape, he was now an accomplice drawing his weapon. Lucas observed that Maul was as reckless as ever and asked whether he had forgotten this was a hospital. Kurosaki said to let him handle this and that he would teach Maul a lesson and show him he could not do anything. Just then, Sano appeared behind Maul using shadow movement and announced that he was here too. Kurosaki stared and cursed that it was his skill. Lucas's unique ability chimed in, stating that it had detected a Control-C and Control-V user and that the target was right ahead. Lucas exclaimed that he had finally found him. Nanace walked in saying this was truly troublesome and that it was one thing after another. First Kurosaki, and now even an international criminal had shown up. As Nanace revealed her weapon, Lucas and Kurosaki were startled. Nanace muttered to herself that it was the witch's blade, and that today really was a terrible day, saying she had to work overtime everywhere she went. Seeing Nanace with a weapon immediately drew onlookers, who whispered whether that was Hunter Nanace and why she was carrying a weapon. In the hospital, Nanace calmly addressed the situation, saying this was a hospital and asking whether they could resolve this peacefully. She then took out 2 mana suppression handcuffs and said that if they were willing to wear these, she would be happy to talk with them both. Kurosaki smirked, and it seemed there was no room for communication. He suddenly grabbed a nearby passerby and yelled that everyone there was his hostage, asking whether they could resolve this peacefully now. However, the next second, Nanisi delivered a powerful kick. Kurosaki was sent flying, crashing hard into the corridor wall, before spitting out a large amount of blood. Seeing this, Lucas broke out in a cold sweat, thinking that the attack was too fast, and that he could not see it clearly at all. Nanace then turned to Lucas and asked whether he should be different from Kurosaki, and whether they could resolve this peacefully. Lucas glanced at the unconscious Kurosaki, debating whether he should use that thing. The scene shifted to his meeting with the elf. When Lucas had asked why he had been chosen, the elf man had explained that this was dark magic power, produced by the contaminated world tree, and that normal people would be poisoned by it. But Lucas was different, he said. Lucas was the same as the Blood Tower Guild's leader. Lucas had asked whether that meant Kurosaki was also the same, and the elf man had confirmed it, saying he used dark magic power to operate his skills. He had told Lucas to feel free to use it, and to inject his dark magic power, and let these contaminated world tree fruits bloom. Back in the present, Lucas sighed and said he was very sorry, stating that he was the same as Kurosaki, and that he could not resolve this peacefully. With Nanesi, he then drew a sword from his waist, and said he would do whatever it took to take him away. Nanesi realized that sword was the prayer sword. Lucas belonged to the country Wise Holy Knight family, which possessed a sword passed down through generations. This weapon was said to be the world's only holy sword, on par with the Collegia dragon sword. Though it did not boost levels or any attributes, the sword had a special name, the Heretic Inquisitor, capable of eliminating any skill or weapon deemed heretical. Hunter Nanesi, wielding the cursed sword, which is blade, was immediately deemed heretical, and the sword moved to eliminate it. Sano immediately grew worried and wanted to help, but Nanes said she was fine and told him not to worry, saying it had just made a nick in the queen's blade. She declared that now it was her turn. She raised her sword and swung, but Lucas dodged the attack with ease. Lucas taunted that it seemed the hospital was limiting her performance, and that she could not beat him without using her skills the very next second. Lucas was proven wrong. Nanes' attack cut his tie, and her next wave of attacks followed instantly. A single sword strike hit Lucas in the chest, the force overwhelming in the next second. Lucas was knocked back several meters. Spitting out blood, he thought that the attack felt like it was going to tear him apart inside, that the holy sword could not make up for the difference in their strength, and wondered if this was the power of the world's 10th ranked. Hunter, he thought, he really did not want to use his skill in the hospital, but that she was forcing him to. Just then, Kurosaki's voice echoed out as he cursed. He woke up from unconsciousness and stood holding the contaminated world tree fruit. Already blooming, he snarled that, since she wanted to protect this hospital so much, he would turn everything to nothing and thrust the fruit into the ground. Lucas cried out to stop it, saying this was a hospital, but Kurosaki smirked and said they were going to place it at key locations in City C. Anyway, so he might as well put one in the hospital too. As massive amounts of dark magic power poured out, everything around them began to corrode. Maul said this was dark magic power, and that only those with dark skills possessed it, but that this amount was a bit much, and that at this rate, everyone in the hospital would suffer mana poisoning. Sano cursed and immediately used shadow movement, instantly appearing behind Kurosaki and wrapping him in spider silk. Kurosaki laughed and said it was too late, and that it could not be stopped. The world tree fruit had been in flower form only a second before, and the next second it began to spread and grow wildly. Everyone had to dodge as its thick branches rampaged through every corner of the hospital. In an instant it formed a small world tree, riddling the entire hospital with holes, and ordinary people inside were suddenly in crisis. Sano and the others quickly began rescue operations, urging people to evacuate as quickly as possible. Patients who could move did so, but many others could not, though they were helping with the rescue. The entire hospital was now filled with demonic energy, and at this rate, everyone would suffer mana poisoning. Sano realized there was now no other way, except to restore the hospital. Thinking this, he immediately used shadow movement to search for Erida. At a rebel site, Shinoda Satoru was busy rescuing civilians. Sano teleported directly behind Shinoda Satoru, who informed him that Erida's room was surprisingly intact. When they reached the room, they found its entrance blocked by thick ice walls. Ares had cast this ice barrier magic to protect the area, but it had not been enough to stop the demonic energy from seeping through once the ice wall shattered. Sano and the others quickly entered. He explained the dire situation to Erida, saying the entire hospital had been ravaged by the enemy, who used a massive tree to spread demonic energy everywhere. Sano believed the fastest solution was for Erida to use her skill and restore everything. Erida readily agreed, stating that with Sano's infinite mana, restoring everything would be no problem. The scene then shifted, showing everyone standing before the giant tree. Shinoda Satoru commented that the tree was even more massive than he had imagined. Someone asked where it had come from. Sano said it was Kurosaki, and that he had escaped and released this thing. Everyone was surprised by this revelation. Erida thought bitterly that he knew her parents were still in the hospital, yet he still did this, and that he did not care about their lives at all. Erida then said that they should begin. Sano immediately started transferring massive amounts of mana to Erida. She placed her hand on the tree's trunk and began releasing her skill. But at that exact instant, the tree seemed to sense danger. It immediately began retracting its roots. Soon, all the roots that had spread throughout the hospital pulled back, forming a massive barrier that blocked Erida's path. Suddenly, a giant opening appeared on the trunk. Massive amounts of demonic energy poured out, directly attacking Erida. Sano, seeing this, became extremely anxious. He quickly ran forward, activating Control V and giant king spider silk. Instantly, the silk formed a protective wall in front of them. The next second, a loud explosion rocked the area. Both the silk and the dark energy dissipated. Shinoda Satoru immediately rushed forward, his face filled with concern, asking whether Senior Sano was okay. Sano replied that he was fine, but that Erida had fainted, and it looked like the restoration had failed. He said they had to quickly evacuate everyone from there, or they would all be poisoned. Shinoda Satoru picked up Erida and immediately ran toward the hospital exit. Sano then pointed at the mysterious tree and asked Ares whether she knew what this thing actually was. Ares replied that, according to the notes her mother had left, it might be from another world, a completely different dimension from theirs. She said she believed it was a fruit from a contaminated world tree. Ares continued that its purpose was to transfer contamination from its source into their dimension, since the world tree's main body was in another dimension. Simply restoring it to its original state would not work there. She added that these fruits could also serve as barriers, and that the enemies would likely plant them all around City C. Sano was extremely shocked to hear this. He realized that a terrifying catastrophe was about to come. 10 minutes later, at the hospital entrance, rescue teams had evacuated a large number of casualties. Magic hunters were desperately trying to use purification magic to eliminate the pervasive dark demonic energy. However, no matter how much they purified, they could not eliminate it. Hunter Association President Fuwa and Takeuchi Go soon arrived on the scene. Takayashi commented grimly that it really was a contaminated world tree from another dimension. Fua agreed, saying that even seeing it with his own eyes, it was hard to believe. Takayashi said that Nanashur still bore great responsibility for this incident, and that he never thought Kurosaki could escape from the world-famous hunter Nenesi. He added that if Lucas was also involved in this, then they would have to demand an explanation from the International Hunter Association. Just then the ground suddenly shook violently, and no one knew what was happening. A hunter immediately ran anxiously toward President Fua and reported that the North District confirmed a second world tree had sprouted. Sano thought that, damn it, Kurosaki had acted quickly once again. Kurosaki, seated in a car with Lucas, said that in this situation, There was no way they could be caught at all. He added that he had not expected Lucas to be so ruthless, and said that Lucas had actually used black magic on ordinary people for brainwashing. He pointed out that people contaminated by him became puppets completely at his command. Hearing this, Lucas became extremely angry and told him to shut up, saying this was all because of him. Kurosaki told him not to be angry and said he was complimenting him. He added that they were looking for them everywhere now, but as long as he was with Lucas, they would never be discovered. He said he was sure they would never think they were hiding in a police car. Meanwhile, back in a Hunter Association president's office, Sano and his group were discussing countermeasures. The president asked whether 2 or 3 more identical trees would appear and then surround the entire city to form some kind of barrier. Aries confirmed that this was at least what was recorded in her mother's notes. She said the same kind of tree had appeared during the Great Disaster. 15 years ago, these contaminated trees acted as both barriers and gates. And when the time came, large numbers of contaminated monsters would appear. Shirasaki asked in shock whether this could be related to the Great Disaster from 15 years ago again. Sano thought about how he remembered his car being attacked by the roots of this tree. Back then, he recalled how his father had driven, desperately trying to escape with him. But despite his father's best efforts, driving at maximum speed, they could not avoid the tree roots attack. They had pierced straight through the entire car. As he thought of this, the cursed hourglass mark on his neck suddenly emitted a faint blue light. He wondered if this could be related to his curse, and cursed under his breath. If the mastermind was the same person, he swore he would make them pay dearly. President FUA then said that he now remembered. There really had been a tree in the city at that time, but he had been busy dealing with a dungeon break and had had no time to pay attention to it. He said it would form a barrier, serve as a gate connecting 2-dimensional worlds, and even open a subspace. Nanisi said she did not quite understand why they were making it so complicated and asked whether there was something special about that subspace. She wondered if it could be a dark soul subspace. She said dark souls needed an environment filled with demonic energy, so they used contaminated trees to form a barrier for them to descend. Ares explained that under the current circumstances, a subspace opening was very likely. However, she said the worst-case scenario was that a gate to another dimensional world might also be opened. Hearing the mention of subspace, Sano suddenly realized an opportunity. He thought that if he could copy it into infinite space, he could solve his problem of insufficient storage and create an unlimited army of golems, and then he would be invincible. He decided that he had to catch the mastermind and obtain a subspace. The discussion then turned to dimensional keys. Takayashi did not believe such things existed, so Sano took out the 2-dimensional fragments he held. Takayashi stared, unable to believe these actually existed, and asked whether this was really a dimensional key. Sano said these were just 2 fragments of the key, and that they needed to collect all 5 for it to truly function. Ares said. Her mother's notes mentioned a contaminated dimensional gate. Once open in country, why now that contaminated trees and dimensional fragments had appeared again? It was very likely that the outsiders from back then were acting once more. She said they might also have dimensional fragments. Then Shirasaki suddenly spoke up and said that actually, their guild also had one of these things. An hour later, everyone arrived at the underground vault of the future guild. Takeuchi commented that this vault door was way too big and asked Master Shirasaki where he had gotten his dimensional fragment. He asked whether he had bought it through underground channels and told him not to let it be a fake and embarrass them. Sonoue was certain a dimensional fragment was inside. He knew fragments resonated with each other. As the massive door slowly opened, the interior was revealed to everyone. In a vast space, only one item rested in the center. It was dimensional fragment number 4, wrapped in a shimmering barrier. Since no one knew what would happen when the fragments merged, only Sano and Shirasaki went inside. This decision actually pleased Takeuchi. He thought that if they accidentally opened some strange dimension, he would make them pay for it. The door closed behind them as Sano and Shirasaki approached the fragment. Sano asked whether Shirasaki could tell him where he had gotten this. Shirasaki replied that he should stop talking nonsense and get to work, saying that once he combined them, he should immediately enter his barrier. Sano scoffed and said he did not need to be so careful. He added that he had already merged them once before, so he should not worry too much. He said confidently that besides, he could use movement skills to escape instantly. The moment Sono touched the fragment, the barrier around it shattered. The dimensional fragment immediately glowed. With a dazzling light, Sano wondered what was happening. A huge explosion echoed through the room. Fortunately, Sano teleported away just in time. Otherwise, he would have been finished. He thought that he never imagined. The fragment would automatically emerge from space and combine itself. He realized that if just the third fragment combining could produce such power, what would happen when the fourth one came? Meanwhile, Shirasaki saw the teleportation skill Sano had just used and became furious. He demanded to know who Sano really was. Sano replied that he was Sano Haruto and asked what was wrong with him. But in the very next second, Shirasaki grabbed Sano's throat. He snarled, asking how Sano could use the highest level forward movement skill. Sano retorted, asking what Shirasaki was going crazy about. Shirasaki pressed him, telling him to explain why he could use dark skills without using dark magic power. Sano thought, damn it, and wondered how he should explain this and whether he should reveal his secret. He quickly tried to explain that he could not use dark magic power, but Shirasaki did not believe this nonsense. He raised his staff and cast black lightning directly at Sono. Sono thought, damn it, and wondered why he could not activate shadow movement. Shirasaki sneered. He said that was because black lightning was the only skill that could stop shadow movement. He continued that he had been suspicious of Sano from the beginning and demanded to know who he really was and what had really happened between him and Kurosaki in the snow mountain. He asked whether this was all part of Sano's plan. Sano cursed, internally thinking, damn it, and wondering how he should explain this. He thought he should not have come in alone with him. Sano knew he had no choice. He thought he had to do this. Then he activated Control C to copy giant spider silk. Instantly, countless silk threads shot out, completely surrounding Shirasaki. He was quickly wrapped into a tight ball. However, the very next second, something happened inside that ball. Bang, the silk ball exploded. Instantly, Shirasaki reappeared right in front of Sano. He warned angrily that if Sano did not confess honestly, he would really die there. Sano wondered whether he would really kill him and why he was so angry. Shirasaki had completely transformed, his aura turning dark as he prepared to unleash his full power. Faced with this dire situation, Sano knew he had only one choice. He immediately summoned his system panel and pulled out 2 bottles of the highest quality potions. The potion description read that it restored 95% of damage, could not be used in combination, and had no effect if the target was already dead. Just then, Shirasaki launched his attack. Countless bolts of black lightning shot directly toward Sano. Sano felt extreme anxiety as his health continuously dropped. He shouted that his health was below 25% and activated the Kalesia Dragon Sword skill. Berserk mode, he then commanded Control V to equip the Kalesia Dragon Sword, dispelling all the surrounding black lightning. He glared at Shirasaki and growled that he had forced him to do this. Sano then swung a heavy sword strike. Shirasaki cried out in shock, wondering what had happened. A huge explosion erupted, leaving Shirasaki covered in wounds, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Then a memory flashed in that memory. His brother had asked what they should call their guild, and said he hoped it would become the strongest in the future. Another voice suggested calling it the Future Guild, and the name was like the memory continued, with them saying they would definitely make it the strongest guild in the future, and that his brother would help him become the world's strongest hunter. The idea of being the world's strongest hunter sounded really good, and Shirasaki had agreed. Another scene emerged from the past. 10 years ago, they had faced even the king of hell without fear, eventually defeating him. However, during preparations for a dungeon raid, they discovered an unidentified person had infiltrated their team. But Shirasaki did not care at all. He had said that the dungeon was pretty famous, so it was normal not to recognize everyone who showed up. He had added that they had his return skill, which meant they could escape any danger inside. Even so, his brother had still been very worried. Then, at the very end of the dungeon raid, an accident still happened. The bandaged man suddenly attacked everyone. Shirasaki had shouted at him. Asking what he was doing, the bandage man had replied that it was dark magic addiction toxin, and that when exposed to air, people's minds would slowly become contaminated. Soon they would turn into low-level monsters, even worse than ghouls. Shirasaki then demanded that he give him the antidote quickly, or he would kill him. The bandaged man said that Shirasaki must have gotten the final reward from that dungeon raid the shadow movement skill. He told him to give it to him, and he would tell him how to save his brother. He added that without dark magic power, that skill was useless with no other choice. Shirasaki handed the skill over. The man continued that the ancestral sword glory from the Cooper family of Country Y was the only way to keep him from being poisoned. Shirasaki shouted in disbelief, asking what he meant and whether he would not give him the antidote. The bandaged man just laughed and said there was no antidote for dark magic addiction. He added that, by the way, the dungeon was a moving dungeon, and once it was successfully raided, the dungeon would move on, and the entire place would collapse. Shirasaki shouted that he never intended to let them go from the beginning. The bandaged man said goodbye and left. The dungeon began to collapse. Shirasaki's brother Nankei, holding something, said that it was something he had found in the boss room. Earlier, he said he did not know what it was, but it was definitely not ordinary. He told Shirasaki that he could not continue walking with him. As Nank's return skill activated, Shirasaki found himself alone back in the guild office. The very next second, he was grief-stricken, shouting up at the sky back in the present. 10 years had passed since that day. Shirasaki thought that he had searched every dungeon, but he had never found that moving dungeon again. He knew the chances of his brother still being alive were low, but even if it was just his remains, he had to bring him back. No wonder he had been called the Dungeon Otaku just now. That was thanks to the Dragon Sword's effect. This was also why he had studied dark magic, power, and dark skills. He did not care about the International Hunter Association's rules at all. Most dark skills should have been destroyed long ago. Shadow movement was an even rarer skill. Probably only that bandage man could still use it. Sano then said to Shirasaki if he had wanted to ask how he had learned it, and that he would tell him. But Shirasaki interrupted and said there was no need. He said that Sano had just used the Kalesia dragon sword, and that he did not think Ares would give that to him. He said he roughly knew Sano's skill, and that it was similar to theft. He said that just like the sword Sano had stolen, the shadow movement skill, he apologized for misunderstanding him, and said that Sano was just someone who used thief skills. Sano retorted that if he was going to apologize, he should remove the word thief. Shirasaki then added that once the dimensional key collection was complete, he wanted to recruit Sano to the future guild. Meanwhile, on the other side, Kurosaki had just planted another contaminated world tree. After resolving the misunderstanding, Sano and Shirasaki walked out of the treasury. Everyone was curious about what had happened inside, but Sano simply made up a random excuse. Suddenly, Nanisher showed up and said she had just received news. The third contaminated world tree had appeared. Based on its location, they could now predict Kurosaki's next move. Ares suggested that before anything else, they needed to gather hunters near Ginza. From the barrier's size and location, she predicted that the subspace would appear in Ginza itself if they could stop him. Before the fourth world tree appeared, they should be fine, Nanisher said. They needed to go back to the association to gather hunters, turning to Sano and Maul. She asked if the two of them wanted to come along. Sano replied that it was all right and that they still had preparations to make, so everyone split up to handle their own tasks. Meanwhile, somewhere in Europe, Michael and his guild members were holding a secret meeting. They had just received a support request from Country H, and of course Country M had been notified as well. The time had come. Michael asked whether the subspace would open normally. The elf replied that of course it would, and that the subspace opening was inevitable. The subspace would be packed with goblins and half-orc monsters. Someone scoffed, asking whether it would really be just goblins and half-orc monsters, and whether they were underestimating Country H's hunters. The elf simply smiled and said not to worry, because everything was going according to plan. Once the subspace opened in City C, there would be a huge debuff, and they absolutely had to succeed this time.